The evening commenced with an invitation for the audience to embark upon a serene and contemplative exploration of mythological narratives, recast and reinterpreted across various epochs. These were not presented as the colossal, heroic sagas typically recounted, but rather as intimate, understated instances where divine beings subtly integrated themselves into the lives of ordinary people, their extraordinary natures veiled in plain sight. The listeners were encouraged to soften their illumination, to find comfort beneath a blanket, and to permit the day's clamor to recede into the background. The discourse promised an examination of 10 distinct narratives, each serving as a faint echo from antiquity, illustrating how primordial forces found themselves immersed in profoundly human circumstances. Some tales were imbued with humor, others with tenderness, all meticulously crafted to guide the audience gently toward a state of repose. A final, tranquil suggestion was offered to further dim the lights, perhaps activating a fan to provide a soft, unobtrusive hum, thereby commencing this deliberate passage through the realms of time and legend. One was then prompted to envision, if capable, the arrival of the ancient gods not upon the hallowed peaks of Mount Olympus, but within the sterile, bustling environment of a contemporary maternity ward. Above, the fluorescent fixtures emitted their characteristic drone, and from a distant corridor, the cry of a newborn infant could be faintly discerned. Yet this was no mere baby. The scene unfolded as an observation of something truly exceptional, a moment of profound significance. Zeus, for instance, did not manifest his arrival with the dramatic fanfare of thunderbolts. Instead, his nascent presence generated a subtle electrical field that remarkably amplified the hospital's wireless internet connectivity. Nurses, during their routine shifts, observed with mild surprise that their mobile devices consistently displayed a full 5 bars of signal, even within the subterranean levels of the facility. They would jest about this peculiar phenomenon during their coffee breaks, entirely oblivious that they were attending to the future sovereign of the gods, a being destined one day to command tempestuous storms, but who, at this juncture, simply required a fresh diaper every few hours, much like any other terrestrial infant. Hera, remarkably, came into existence just 3 floors above, within the confines of the same medical institution, on that very same night. The maternity ward's sophisticated security cameras exhibited a curious predilection, mysteriously and repeatedly focusing their lenses upon her nursery, as if an intrinsic quality about her commanded and drew their attention. The pediatric nursing staff found themselves unconsciously adjusting and straightening their uniforms whenever they approached her bassinet. Even in her infancy, she radiated an undeniable aura, an inherent regality, a watchful composure. When she vocalized her needs, her cries resonated less as typical infant distress and more akin to a sovereign decree, signaling an immediate and imperative requirement for attention. Meanwhile, nestled within the neonatal intensive care unit, Athena, though premature, emerged perfectly formed. She opened her eyes at an age far earlier than any infant typically would. Dr. Martinez, the attending neonatologist, steadfastly maintained that the infant had gazed directly at her with an expression of profound, ancient sagacity. Impossible, she silently admonished herself, yet meticulously recorded the observation within the baby's chart nonetheless. Baby Athena's brain scans presented anomalous activity in cortical regions specifically associated with sophisticated strategic thought. The medical team collectively attributed these readings to a presumed malfunction of their equipment, But driven by an inexplicable unease, they meticulously conducted the diagnostic tests an additional 3 times to ensure absolute certainty. Concurrently, across the expansive metropolitan area, within a distinct medical facility, Apollo and Artemis entered the world as fraternal twins, born to a mother who taught music and a father who served as a park ranger. The delivery chamber became suffused with an inexplicable golden luminescence, which the attending medical personnel readily dismissed as merely the afternoon sun's rays streaming through the windows at a uniquely perfect angle. Apollo's inaugural cry possessed an almost melodic quality, a pure, resonant note that compelled every individual present in the room to pause, momentarily captivated, and subsequently to smile. Artemis, in stark contrast, was born in utter silence, yet acutely alert, her silver-gray eyes diligently observing her surroundings, seemingly absorbing every minute detail of the room. The twins' parents, Sarah and Mike, promptly began to observe a series of peculiar occurrences. Every single plant thriving within their household flourished with an unreasoning vitality, far surpassing typical growth. During their daily walks, the neighborhood felines would consistently trail Artemis's stroller. When Apollo would cry, flocks of birds would congregate outside their window, not in a state of alarm or agitation, but as if responding to an unseen summons. Sarah confided these strange events to her mother, who, with a dismissive wave, suggested they were merely coincidences. Yet Sarah herself harbored lingering doubts. In a tranquil suburb located approximately 40 minutes distant, Aphrodite was welcomed into the world by parents who operated a modest flower shop. Her delivery proceeded with remarkable ease, and subsequently, every individual who entered her hospital room remarked upon the exquisite beauty that permeated the space. The soft afternoon light, the elegant drape of the curtains, even the utilitarian hospital blankets, all appeared to possess an enhanced grace and elegance. The florists tasked with delivering arrangements to the maternity ward found themselves instinctively selecting particularly breathtaking bouquets, though they could offer no rational explanation for their choices. Baby Aphrodite rarely exhibited fussiness. Instead, she observed the world with eyes that seemed to grasp an intrinsic understanding of beauty and the profound essence of human connection. When her parents held her, they invariably found themselves speaking with greater kindness to one another, their laughter more readily flowing. The effect was subtle, yet undeniably present. Ares made his entrance during the tumultuous throes of a thunderstorm. Born to a military family within a base hospital, the labor was intense but remarkably swift, and the very instant he arrived, the tempest raging outside seemed to abate, dissolving into a relative calm. His father, Staff Sergeant Williams, humorously remarked that his son possessed an inherent fighting spirit, noting the baby's remarkably strong grip. Little Ares slept peacefully through the most jarring noises. The blare of sirens, the rumble of thunder, the cries of other infants. Yet he would become instantly alert at any sound signifying conflict or distress, as if his very being was already attuned to the vibrational frequency of struggle. In a picturesque coastal community, Poseidon was born to a pair of dedicated marine biologists, his arrival coinciding precisely with the high tide. The onset of labor began exactly as the oceanic current turned, and the infant made his appearance just as the waves reached their apex, crashing highest against the shoreline. The hospital, strategically constructed near the water's edge, typically contended with persistent issues regarding water pressure on its upper floors. However, on this particular night, every single faucet flowed with perfect, consistent pressure. The maintenance personnel were utterly baffled, but profoundly grateful for the inexplicable improvement. Baby Poseidon exhibited a distinct fascination with the sounds of water. The gentle rush of a sink, the rhythmic patter of rain against windows, even the subtle clinking of ice cubes settling within a glass. His parents, both ardent lovers of the ocean, perceived this as entirely natural, yet visitors observed how the baby would calm instantly at any water-related sound, as if recognizing a long-lost companion. Demeter's birth occurred amidst the vibrant activity of harvest season, to parents who diligently worked as farmers. Her labor commenced at the first hint of dawn, precisely as her mother and father prepared for the day's demanding tasks in the fields. She arrived as the sun fully ascended, and with her emergence, every single crop across their entire property appeared to ripen with impeccable perfection that very day. Neighbors lightheartedly quipped that the new baby had ushered in a wave of good fortune, but Demeter's parents distinctly noticed their vegetables growing to unprecedented sizes and possessing an unparalleled sweetness. The infant Demeter seemed to find her greatest contentment when in proximity to burgeoning plant life. She would cease her fussing immediately when carried through the verdant garden, and the houseplants adorning her nursery grew with an unusual, robust vigor. Her very first smile graced her lips when her mother cradled her near the kitchen's herb garden, enveloped by the intoxicating aromas of fresh basil and rosemary. Within an artist's loft nestled in the heart of the city, Hephaestus was born to a sculptor and a metalworker. His delivery proved to be complicated, and he arrived with a minor leg difference that would necessitate a course of physical therapy. Nevertheless, his parents embraced him with unreserved joy. The truly intriguing aspect was that every single tool within his father's workshop seemed to function with enhanced efficiency after his birth. Joints that had previously been stiff now moved with fluid grace. Metal that had once presented significant challenges to shape now became remarkably pliable. Baby Hephaestus exhibited an intense fascination with various textures and tools. He would instinctively reach for his father's safely stored and meticulously cleaned hammers, long before he showed interest in conventional toys. His tiny hands seemed to possess an innate comprehension of how components interlocked, how mechanisms operated. His parents would jokingly remark that he was destined to become an engineer someday, entirely unaware of how profoundly close their jest was to an ancient, profound truth. Finally, in a bustling downtown hospital, Hermes was born to parents deeply immersed in the fields of logistics and communications. His delivery was remarkably swift, so rapid, in fact, that he very nearly made his entrance within the confines of the hospital elevator, caught between floors. From his earliest moments, he displayed an extraordinary level of alertness and mobility, achieving developmental milestones significantly ahead of schedule. He rolled over, sat up, and began to crawl, all with precocious speed. His parents, employed by competing courier companies, observed a peculiar pattern. On days when baby Hermes was particularly active, their respective delivery routes seemed to flow with inexplicable smoothness. Traffic lights would turn green at precisely the opportune moment. Packages arrived at their destinations earlier than anticipated, and communication with their dispatch centers was notably clearer than usual. These 12 infants, having entered the world within the same year and across the same sprawling metropolitan area, matured into outwardly normal children, save for a collection of minor, almost imperceptible distinctions. They consistently excelled in particular domains, appeared to be inherently drawn to specific elemental forces, and exerted an unusual, subtle influence upon their immediate surroundings. Their parents frequently exchanged observations from pediatrician visits and shared experiences during playdates, gradually forging a close-knit community centered around these remarkably bright and unusual children. As they progressed through childhood, attending the same schools and frequenting the same parks, a compelling phenomenon began to unfold. When these children were gathered together, their collective effects became noticeably more pronounced. Playground equipment, for instance, seemed to operate with an enhanced safety. The garden plots within the school's environmental program flourished with unparalleled vitality. The school's wireless internet connectivity experienced no crashes, and educators observed how these particular children collaborated with an innate, seamless synergy, as if their acquaintance predated their few short years. One might ponder what it would truly entail if divine power manifested not through spectacular, dramatic miracles, but rather as subtle, gentle enhancements to the fabric of everyday existence. What if gods walked among humanity, not as colossal, larger-than-life figures, but as unassuming children who subtly improved the world around them, rendering it a fraction better, a touch more interconnected, and imbued with a hint more magic? Perhaps the more pertinent inquiry is not whether deities could be reborn into our contemporary world, but rather whether humanity would possess the discernment to recognize them if they were to appear. Speaking of divine beings integrating with mortal life, the narrative then shifted to introduce a man named Demetrius Koronos, who dedicated his life to teaching primary school in Sparta during the profoundly challenging era of World War II. His surname, intriguingly, translated to thunder in ancient Greek. Despite this powerful etymology, he was acknowledged as the most gentle and compassionate teacher the children had ever known. Each morning, without fail, one would find him at 6:30 a.m., diligently sweeping the steps of the small, unassuming stone schoolhouse, preparing meticulously for yet another day of nurturing the minds of children whose fathers were away fighting on distant battlefronts, and whose mothers labored longer and harder than ever before, worked longer hours than they had ever experienced before. Demetrius was a newcomer to the tranquil village, having made his arrival just prior to the outbreak of the war. He asserted his origins were from the northern regions, and he sought a peaceful occupation within the realm of education. The children, without exception, held a deep affection for him, although they struggled to articulate the precise reasons for this profound attachment. The moment Demetrius stepped into a classroom, even the most boisterous and inattentive students found themselves captivated, their focus drawn to his presence. His voice possessed an extraordinary resonance, imbuing every lesson with a sense of paramount significance and rendering every narrative worthy of meticulous retention. When he expounded upon the annals of ancient Greece, his gaze would adopt a distant, contemplative quality, as if he were delving into personal recollections rather than merely disseminating information from scholastic tomes. The ravages of war had rendered everything scarce: paper, writing instruments, sustenance, and perhaps most crucially, hope. Yet, in some inexplicable manner, Demetrius's classroom never suffered from a paucity of provisions. While other instructors found their chalk depleted, his personal supply box remained mysteriously replete. During the unforgiving winter months, when the school building became almost insufferably cold, his particular classroom maintained a comfortable warmth, despite the absence of any discernible additional heating apparatus. The children observed these anomalies but refrained from inquiry, understanding that adults were preoccupied with far more pressing concerns amidst the wartime exigencies. Maria Stavros, a perceptive 8-year-old, was the first among the students to harbor suspicions that their teacher might possess an extraordinary nature. During a particularly violent thunderstorm, which compelled other classes to seek refuge beneath their desks in fear, Demetrius, with remarkable composure, flung the windows wide open and instructed his pupils to listen intently. "The sky is engaged in a profound discourse," he articulated serenely. "Can you discern its pronouncements?" As he spoke, the tempest appeared to abate, as if actively heeding his words. Young Nikos Papandreou, whose father was actively engaged in combat in Albania, once posed a query to Demetrius regarding the imminent conclusion of the war. The teacher, casting his gaze towards the burgeoning clouds outside the window, responded, "Certain atmospheric disturbances must complete their inherent trajectory. Yet every storm, without exception, ultimately dissipates." That very afternoon, the village received its inaugural piece of encouraging intelligence in several months, a dispatch conveying the safety of Nikos's father and his impending return home for a period of leave. The schoolmaster exhibited several peculiar idiosyncrasies. He consistently eschewed carrying an umbrella, yet he never appeared to be dampened by the rain. He possessed an uncanny ability to forecast meteorological shifts several days in advance, a skill that proved invaluable to families in preparing their modest garden plots and safeguarding their meager remaining livestock. Farmers, recognizing the unwavering accuracy of his predictions, began to consult him informally, and his prognostications consistently proved infallible. During the brutal winter of 1941-42, when food supplies dwindled to desperately low levels, Demetrius initiated the organization of communal meals within the school courtyard. In an astonishing fashion, pots of stew that were theoretically sufficient to feed only 20 individuals somehow managed to satiate 40. Families contributed whatever scarce provisions they could muster. A handful of potatoes, a measure of barley, wild greens, and departed feeling more nourished than the sum of the ingredients should have permitted. The village priest, Father Andreas, frequently observed these gatherings with profound astonishment. He noted that whenever Demetrius quietly, almost imperceptibly, offered a blessing over the food, there invariably appeared to be an abundance. The priest, a scholar of theology for many years, had never witnessed anything remotely comparable to the humble school teacher's extraordinary influence over both the elements and the community. One particular evening, as villagers converged for one of these communal repasts, German patrol aircraft traversed the overhead skies. Everyone instinctively looked upwards, gripped by a palpable fear, as aerial bombardments had become an increasingly frequent occurrence. Demetrius, however, remained perfectly composed, his gaze fixed upon the heavens. The planes executed a single, then a second circuit, before continuing their trajectory northward without incident. The villagers attributed this fortunate outcome to sheer luck, but Demetrius offered a subtle smile, a gesture that hinted at a knowledge beyond their comprehension. As the months progressed, the children began to exchange narratives about their teacher that bordered on the realm of the fantastical. Little Anna solemnly swore she had observed Demetrius engaged in conversation with the eagles that nested in the hills above the school. Petro staunchly maintained that his teacher possessed the ability to summon lightning bugs into jars, simply by politely requesting their presence. Sophia adamantly insisted that whenever Demetrius experienced profound joy, the classroom would become imbued with an electrical charge, causing their hair to stand subtly on end. The adults dismissed these accounts as mere products of childhood imagination, yet privately, they harbored their own nascent curiosities. There was an undeniable quality about Demetrius Koronos that defied conventional patterns. He never exhibited fatigue, never succumbed to illness, and never lost his equanimity, even when confronted with the most challenging students. His lessons concerning Greek mythology were delivered with such vividness that the children would dream about them for days following. During the spring of 1942, British aircraft commenced regular supply drops to Greek resistance fighters concealed within the mountainous terrain. These clandestine operations were intended to remain secret, yet Demetrius invariably appeared to possess foreknowledge of their timing. On such days, he would schedule outdoor lessons, leading his class to hillside meadows where they would practice reading and arithmetic, conveniently positioned to observe parachutes descending gracefully, reminiscent of flowers blossoming in the sky. The resistance fighters, appreciative of his discretion and assistance, began to hold quiet meetings with Demetrius. Although he never participated in their missions, his precise weather predictions aided them in evading German patrols and in orchestrating successful operations. They bestowed upon him the moniker Koronos the Oracle, unaware of how accurately that epithet reflected his true nature. As the war persisted and living conditions deteriorated, Demetrius's presence became even more indispensable to the village's continued existence. His understated leadership proved instrumental in resolving conflicts that arose over diminishing resources. His dedicated teachings sustained the intellectual engagement and hope of the children amidst an otherwise bleak reality. His profound meteorological expertise assisted farmers in maximizing their meager harvests. Most significantly, however, he instilled in the populace a profound sense of belief. When he recounted tales of ancient heroes surmounting insurmountable obstacles, when he elucidated how all storms eventually receded and how spring unfailingly returned, when he gazed at the sky with an unshakable conviction in the advent of better days, the villagers, too, found themselves embracing this faith. One day in early 1943, when the prospect of liberation, though still distant, began to seem attainable, Maria Stavros, now a more courageous 9-year-old, finally articulated the question that had silently preoccupied all the children. "Demetrius, are you one of the ancient gods from the stories?" The teacher responded with a gentle smile and placed a tender hand upon her head. The ambient air around them seemed to shimmer momentarily, carrying the evocative scent of mountain rain and ozone. "What do you surmise, my dear child?" he inquired. "Does my identity truly matter, or is it our actions for one another that hold greater significance?" Maria pondered this question with profound earnestness and concluded that his presence, his unwavering assistance in their survival, their learning, and their hope, was of paramount importance, irrespective of his true nature. When the war finally concluded and German forces commenced their retreat, the village erupted in celebration within the school courtyard. Demetrius stood quietly at the periphery of the jubilant throng, observing his students and their families embracing and weeping with unbridled joy. As the festivities extended into the night, people became aware of the teacher's disappearance. Their search for him the following day yielded only a note discovered upon his desk. Continue to nurture and support one another. Remember that every tempest eventually subsides, and shared wisdom invariably grows in strength. The desk drawer contained meticulously prepared lesson plans for the forthcoming academic year, and a generous abundance of supplies sufficient to ensure the school's continued operation. Demetrius Koronos was never again seen in that particular form, in that specific location. However, on certain stormy nights, when a gentle rain descended upon the village gardens and thunder rolled softly across the hills, the elder residents swore they could discern a familiar voice emanating from the sky, still imparting lessons on the virtues of patience, the strength of community, and the immutable certainty that arduous times are not destined to endure indefinitely. Perhaps the most profound enchantment did not reside in the ability to command storms or to miraculously multiply sustenance, but rather in demonstrating to humanity that even deities, when truly sagacious, elect to serve rather than to govern. At times, the most divine act one can perform is to assist a child in acquiring literacy, or to ensure that no individual experiences hunger, or simply to be present when people are most in need of hope. And perhaps that is a universal lesson from which we could all benefit. Whether we are exiled gods or merely mortals striving our utmost during challenging periods, the sagacity of divine educators and patient deities leads us to yet another narrative of understated power. This particular account transports us to the mountainous regions of 19th century Greece. Following Napoleon's defeat, and while the Ottoman Empire still exerted its dominion over Greek territories, there resided a woman named Kyrio Vasiliki, who would fundamentally alter the prevailing perspectives within an entire region regarding marriage, personal autonomy, and the entitlements of widows. One would have invariably discovered her each morning at the break of dawn, traversing the terraced vineyards situated above the village of Maestras, meticulously inspecting the vines that, against all odds, yielded the most exquisite grapes in the Peloponnese. Vasiliki had been widowed 3 years prior when her husband tragically perished in a construction accident, leaving her with 2 young offspring and a modest, yet remarkably productive, parcel of land. In accordance with prevailing customs, a widow was traditionally expected to remarry swiftly for pragmatic considerations: protection, financial solvency, and social standing. The village matchmakers had diligently arranged several suitable prospective partners, including her late husband's brother, which was a customary practice, and the eldest son of the mayor, an alliance that would have conferred considerable advantages. However, Vasiliki, with quiet resolve, unwavering politeness, and persistent consistency, declined every single offer. This was not an act of rebellion in any dramatic sense. Vasiliki never raised her voice nor delivered grand pronouncements. She simply conducted her life with such an exemplary degree of competence and inherent dignity that people began to ponder why matrimony was universally deemed an absolute necessity. Her children flourished under her devoted care. Her vineyard consistently produced superior wine compared to farms tended by multiple generations of men. Her humble abode was perpetually immaculate, always exuding a welcoming ambiance, and somehow invariably possessed an ample supply of food for unexpected visitors. The village priest, Father Mallis, initially harbored reservations regarding Vasiliki's status as an unmarried woman and the potential implications for established societal norms. However, During a visit to her dwelling to address these concerns, he was met with a series of astonishing revelations. He observed her daughter engrossed in advanced literary works in both Greek and Turkish, while her son was mastering arithmetic concepts that far exceeded the knowledge of most adult villagers. Vasiliki herself exhibited a profound and seemingly self-taught expertise in legal affairs, agricultural practices, and medicinal remedies, a breadth of knowledge that appeared to transcend any formal education she might have received. "From where did you acquire such extensive understanding of legal matters?" he inquired, his curiosity genuinely piqued. Vasiliki responded with a gentle smile, indicating a collection of tomes and documents meticulously stored within a sturdy wooden chest. When one is compelled to safeguard the inheritance of one's children and assert one's own autonomy, one diligently acquires the necessary wisdom, she stated with unadorned simplicity. Soon, whispers began to circulate throughout the community about this remarkable widow, whose grasp of Ottoman property law was said to be superior to that of the local magistrates. Her ability to forecast weather patterns proved more accurate than farmers with decades of practical experience, and she possessed an almost preternatural talent for mediating and resolving conflicts between neighbors. Consequently, people increasingly sought her counsel, not merely for advice on farming techniques, but also for complex legal predicaments, intricate family disputes, and significant business decisions, solidifying her reputation as a fount of practical wisdom. A pivotal moment arrived when Kyrios Panagiotis, an affluent landowner hailing from a nearby settlement, launched an attempt to appropriate a portion of Vasiliki's vineyard. His argument rested on the assertion that a woman could not legitimately possess such valuable real estate without the oversight of a male guardian. To bolster his claim, he presented official-looking papers and brought forth two witnesses who solemnly swore that her deceased husband had pledged to sell the land prior to his passing. The villagers, accustomed to traditional hierarchical structures, fully expected Vasiliki to either yield to this demand or, at the very least, enlist the assistance of her male relatives to represent her interests. Yet, to their profound surprise, she appeared at the local administrator's office entirely on her own, armed with her own meticulously organized and clearly annotated documentation. She not only furnished irrefutable proof of her unequivocal ownership, but also presented compelling evidence that Panagiotis had systematically attempted similar land seizures from other vulnerable widows across the region. Her presentation was executed with such thoroughness, and her command of legal procedure was so impressive, that the administrator, a Turkish official who had initially shown some partiality towards Panagiotis's assertion, instead ruled decisively and entirely in Vasiliki's favor. Furthermore, he promptly initiated a comprehensive investigation into Panagiotis's other questionable land acquisitions, a testament to Vasiliki's undeniable legal prowess. Following this resounding triumph, a steady stream of other women began to approach Vasiliki, seeking her invaluable assistance with their own property disagreements, intricate inheritance queries, and various legal challenges. She steadfastly refused any monetary compensation for her services, but in an expression of profound gratitude, families began to present her with thoughtful gifts of sustenance, finely woven cloth, and essential tools. Her modest household thus organically transformed into an informal, yet indispensable legal aid center, serving women throughout the scattered mountain villages. What truly distinguished Vasiliki's profound influence was the astute and nuanced manner in which she addressed these intricate problems. She never engaged in direct confrontation with the established social order. Instead, she masterfully demonstrated how women could navigate and successfully operate within its existing framework, provided they understood their actual legal entitlements rather than passively accepting traditional, often restrictive limitations. She diligently instructed wives and widows on how to meticulously read property documents, comprehend the complexities of inheritance law, and accurately record their financial and practical contributions to family businesses, thereby empowering them with crucial knowledge. The local matchmakers, who had initially expressed frustration at her persistent refusal to remarry, gradually began to yield a grudging respect for her independent choice as they witnessed the remarkable efficacy with which she managed her personal and financial affairs. Some even started to suggest that perhaps the young women they represented should consider postponing marriage until they had acquired a more thorough understanding of their own legal rights and financial situations. A significant shift in traditional matrimonial advice. During the tranquil winter months, when the arduous work in the vineyards was minimal, Vasiliki initiated informal gatherings within her home. These sessions offered women the opportunity to acquire fundamental literacy skills, basic arithmetic, and essential legal principles. These were not dramatic political assemblies. Rather, they ingeniously mimicked traditional women's work gatherings, complete with spinning, weaving, and the preparation of food. Yet the conversation deliberately shifted from idle gossip to focused practical education, subtly fostering intellectual growth. Her daughter Sophia flourished remarkably within this nurturing environment, achieving such an exceptional level of education that the village teacher, a man, frequently sought her counsel on particularly challenging academic questions. Her son, Demetrius, matured with a progressive worldview, perceiving women as highly capable decision-makers and equitable partners in the management of the household. Both children were unequivocally being prepared for futures that gracefully transcended the confines of traditional gender roles, embodying their mother's quiet revolution. The most profound societal transformation occurred when several young women in the village began to petition their fathers, requesting a delay in their arranged marriages. Their desire was to properly prepare themselves through Vasiliki's informal education program, seeking knowledge and practical skills before entering matrimony. Consequently, instead of the customary few months between betrothal and wedding, families began to grant a period of 1 or even 2 years, allowing brides-to-be to diligently develop essential practical skills and a solid grasp of legal knowledge. This significant shift yielded a cascade of unexpected benefits for everyone involved. Marriages became notably more stable as women entered them equipped with realistic expectations and invaluable practical understanding. Families prospered because wives could contribute far more effectively to household economics and astute property management. Even the men discovered that educated wives proved to be not only more intellectually engaging companions, but also more capable and reliable partners in life's endeavors. Local officials, who had initially harbored suspicion towards any assembly that might potentially challenge established authority, gradually came to acknowledge that Vasiliki's pervasive influence, far from being disruptive, actually fortified community stability. Tangible improvements were observed. Property disputes saw a marked decrease, family businesses operated with greater efficiency, and the entire region cultivated a distinguished reputation for nurturing particularly capable women who, rather than threatening the social order, actively strengthened their families and communities. As the years gracefully unfolded, Vasiliki steadfastly chose not to remarry. Although several respectable and worthy men continued to propose periodically, she had meticulously fashioned a life that profoundly satisfied her intellectually, emotionally, and practically. Her children matured into well-educated, confident adults, a testament to her upbringing. Her vineyard continued to yield abundant prosperity. Her esteemed reputation as a sagacious counselor spread far beyond the immediate confines of her region. Inspired by her example, other widows began to follow suit, consciously choosing to remain unmarried and establishing independent households, founded upon their own skills and resources. This phenomenon was not perceived as radical, precisely because Vasiliki had convincingly demonstrated that such arrangements could, in fact, bolster rather than undermine communal stability. When Greek independence was finally achieved in the 1820s, the region was already well accustomed to the presence of strong, capable women assuming leadership roles within both family and community affairs. The transition to new political arrangements in this area proved remarkably smoother than in many other parts of the nascent nation, largely because local women were thoroughly prepared to manage increased responsibilities, while men focused their energies on the pressing military and political changes of the era. Vasiliki herself enjoyed a long and full life, living well into her 80s, surrounded by her beloved children, grandchildren, and a thriving community of women who had absorbed the profound lesson that marriage could be a deliberate choice rather than an inescapable economic imperative. Her prosperous vineyard eventually passed into the capable hands of her daughter, who, in turn, had chosen to marry a man who deeply respected her education and cherished her independence. Her son embarked on a career as a dedicated teacher, one who passionately insisted on educating girls with the same thoroughness and rigor as boys, carrying forward his mother's enlightened principles. Near the twilight of her life, when gently questioned about her enduring decision to remain unmarried, Vasiliki offered a profound and insightful response. "I never rejected the institution of marriage itself. What I refused was marriage devoid of understanding, bereft of choice, and lacking in dignity. Perhaps the most crucial lesson I imparted was that women, much like fine wine, accrue greater value through patience, through the acquisition of knowledge, and through the provision of proper conditions for their growth and flourishing." Her enduring legacy was not characterized by dramatic revolution or overt political upheaval, but rather by a quiet yet profound transformation of societal expectations regarding what women could authentically achieve and what the institution of marriage could evolve into when entered freely by educated and empowered partners. It often holds true that the most lasting and significant changes in society are not wrought through conflict or grand declarations, but through the unassuming example of competent individuals who simply choose to live differently, thereby illuminating new possibilities for others to embrace. Indeed, perhaps that is precisely how genuine social progress frequently unfolds. Not through spectacular, sweeping gestures, but through the unassuming actions of individuals who subtly demonstrate that alternative choices can, in fact, pave the way for superior outcomes, benefiting everyone within the community. This very notion of quiet transformation, nurtured by patient wisdom, now guides our narrative to 1970s Greece, a period overshadowed by the oppressive rule of the military junta. During these dark years, ubiquitous censorship and pervasive political tension rendered even the simplest expressions of culture fraught with danger. Yet, in the northern city of Thessaloniki, a small, unassuming radio station somehow managed to defy the gloom, broadcasting a beacon of hope through the dictatorship's most arduous years. One would have discovered this particular station nestled within a converted apartment building, located 3 flights above street level. Here, a man named Fedros Luminatsis diligently worked the overnight shift, from the stroke of midnight until 6 in the morning. His program, famously titled Songs Before Dawn, officially presented traditional Greek music and poetry, all meticulously pre-approved by the government censors. However, discerning listeners across northern Greece intuitively understood that something profoundly special, something beyond the official script, unfolded during those hushed, pre-dawn hours, when the vast majority of people were lost in slumber. Fedros had made his appearance in Thessaloniki in 1971, applying for a position at the radio station with an impeccably curated resume, boasting sterling credentials in music, literature, and communications. His references, originating from reputable universities and esteemed cultural institutions, checked out perfectly upon verification. Yet a curious detail emerged. No one at these institutions seemed to recall him with particular clarity. He spoke modern Greek with flawless fluency, but occasionally he would employ phrases that sounded distinctly archaic, as if he had acquired the language centuries ago and was still subtly adjusting to contemporary usage, lending him an air of enigmatic timelessness. The overnight shift at the station was generally regarded as less desirable. It attracted fewer listeners, entailed minimal supervision, and was primarily viewed as mere filler until the morning programming commenced. Despite this, Fedros specifically requested this particular time slot, explaining that he favored the quiet hours when people were, in his estimation, most receptive to the evocative power of music and poetry. The station manager, immensely relieved to find a willing candidate for the unpopular night hours, did not question this rather unusual preference, considering it a fortunate alignment of need and desire. Fedros, the host of Songs Before Dawn, found his true calling during the nocturnal hours, a preference he never questioned. From its inaugural broadcast, an unparalleled quality permeated Songs Before Dawn. Fedros possessed a vocal timbre that seemed to radiate warmth and clarity, imbued with an intrinsic light that offered profound reassurance, even when navigating sensitive subjects. He cultivated an intimate rapport with his audience, conversing as if addressing cherished companions, empathetically recognizing their hardships without directly challenging the reigning authorities, and offering sincere encouragement without venturing into seditious pronouncements. His musical selections, while ostensibly customary, subtly articulated underlying themes that transcended the grasp of overt indoctrination. Venerable tunes about liberation, lyrical compositions extolling fortitude, and traditional ballads celebrating collective solidarity through adversity formed the core of his offerings. The official censors sanctioned each piece, deeming individual songs innocuous, yet astute listeners discerned a profound narrative of optimism and steadfastness woven throughout the programming. Nocturnal laborers across the entire territory, including dedicated nurses, vigilant security guards, diligent taxi drivers, and bakers preparing their morning loaves, began to rely upon Fedros's program to alleviate the burden of their solitary vigils. His voice permeated the nocturnal expanse, forging bonds among disparate individuals, connecting them into an unseen fellowship of auditors who derived solace and fortitude from their common heritage, and an unspoken opposition to the prevailing climate. Maria Katsias, a nurse at the metropolis's main hospital, subsequently recounted Fedros's uncanny intuition regarding precisely what his audience required for spiritual sustenance. On evenings when detentions for political reasons had engendered widespread apprehension among families, he would broadcast particularly soothing melodies. When financial strains exacerbated quotidian existence, he would recite verses extolling tenacity and collective unity. And when restrictions on expression intensified, he would devise innovative methods of honoring Hellenic legacy, thereby reminding people of principles transcending governmental authority. The program's preeminent distinguishing characteristic was Fedros's adept management of audience submissions. Individuals could communicate via telephone or correspondence, requesting melodies for kin, acquaintances, or momentous events. By some inexplicable means, he consistently possessed the perfectly apposite selection of music for each situation, even for requests involving songs that had faded from public consciousness for many years, or lyrical collections that were notoriously elusive. University students, especially those pursuing Hellenic studies and literary arts, commenced their nocturnal vigil to listen to Songs Before Dawn, because Fedros would periodically impart profound interpretations of classical Hellenic writings that remained uncatalogued in conventional scholastic curricula. His grasp of ancient poetry appeared remarkably profound and intimately understood, as though he had personally witnessed their genesis. Throughout 1973, as geopolitical anxieties escalated and the military regime's dominion grew more tyrannical, Fedros's program became ever more pivotal to its auditors. He scrupulously avoided overt political pronouncements, but his meticulous selection and presentation of Greek cultural heritage served as a poignant mnemonic, reminding people of their country's illustrious past, of enduring trials and tribulations, and its eventual triumph over tyranny. The program's influence transcended mere amusement. Educators began integrating melodies and verses from Songs Before Dawn into their curricula, discovering inventive methods to safeguard Hellenic pedagogical heritage despite escalating limitations. Families convened around their receivers during the broadcast, utilizing the music as opportunities to recount narratives and sustain their links to ancestral customs that governmental coercion sought to eradicate. Perhaps paramountly, Fedros forged an unbroken thread of connection between Greece's venerable legacy and its contemporary tribulations. His program posited that the identical fortitude that had sustained Hellenic culture across millennia of vicissitudes remained accessible to modern individuals confronting their particular adversities. The broadcasting apparatus of the radio station seemed to function exceptionally effectively during Fedros's shifts. Technical personnel observed that transmission quality was unfailingly superb from midnight to 6 a.m., devoid of the customary malfunctions that afflicted alternative broadcasting slots. The station's signal inexplicably extended its range farther than anticipated, with auditors reporting unblemished auditory clarity in secluded highland communities and distant insular territories, where other programs suffered from degraded transmission. Official censors periodically scrutinized the program's content, but consistently failed to identify any subversive material. Fedros was meticulously circumspect, adhering strictly to prescribed regulations, yet his audience discerned that he was offering something of greater intrinsic worth than mere diversion, an affirmation of Hellenic cultural resilience, a reminder that it was stronger than any political system and would transcend prevailing hardships. As 1973 advanced towards the seminal occurrences that would eventually precipitate the regime's downfall, Songs Before Dawn became increasingly pivotal as a wellspring of optimism and national distinctiveness. Fedros refrained from overt prognostications regarding governmental shifts, but his curation of auditory and lyrical content appeared to prime his audience for the possibility that arduous periods were ephemeral and a more propitious future awaited. The program's preeminent indelible instance came in November 1973 during the insurrection by scholars at the Athens Polytechnic Institute. While the majority of communication outlets faced severe restrictions, Fedros skillfully alluded to the occurrences through veiled references, broadcasting a sequence of melodies about the vigor of nascent generations, valor, and devotion to principles. The audience comprehended that he was commemorating the students' intrepidity without infringing upon transmission regulations. After the military regime was ultimately overthrown in 1974, many people anticipated a profound metamorphosis of Songs Before Dawn, perhaps becoming increasingly partisan or modern in its orientation. Instead, Fedros persisted in his customary subtle methodology, broadcasting traditional music and poetry that served as a reminder to Hellenes of their ancestral legacy and the significance of preserving communal ties amidst all forms of societal flux. However, as constitutional rule was reinstated and Hellas embarked upon swift modernization, the program's listenership gravitated towards daylight programming and modern material. The nocturnal broadcast slot diminished in prominence, and the broadcasting executive proposed that Fedros could potentially favor employment during prime audience periods. To everyone's astonishment, Fedros rejected the advancement opportunity. He stated that he cherished the serene personal connection of the overnight hours and the unique rapport he had cultivated with listeners who sought solace during their isolated moments. But imperceptibly, his commitment to the program appeared to diminish, as though his distinct purpose had been fulfilled. In 1975, Fedros tendered his departure, stating he was rejoining his kin in the Hellenic countryside. His valedictory transmission was unadorned yet poignant, an anthology of cherished melodies from the program's quadrennial tenure, accompanied by succinct remarks about how much the devotion of his audience had signified to him. He concluded by asserting that melodies and verses would perpetually offer solace and enlightenment, far beyond the evanescence of any individual presenter. The station endeavored to secure a successor presenter for Songs Before Dawn, but none could truly replicate the essence of what Fedros had created. The program persisted for an additional brief period, but was ultimately supplanted by standardized nocturnal broadcasts. In subsequent years, people who had listened to Songs Before Dawn would frequently recall the profound significance of the broadcast during that arduous epoch. Many affirmed that Fedros's vocal timbre and curated musical pieces had assisted in preserving their Hellenic selfhood and optimism for an improved future when both appeared to be imperiled. Veteran auditors asserted that on particular unclouded evenings, when meteorological circumstances were ideal, they could sporadically discern vestiges of familiar music and that reassuring, inspiring vocalization permeating the ethereal currents from some remote transmitter. Irrespective of whether this phenomenon stemmed from recollection, fancy, or an altogether different origin, it served as an affirmation of the zenith of Hellenic civilization. The melodies, verses, and communal ethos that Fedros had celebrated. persisted with undiminished vigor. Perhaps the most exquisite transmissions aren't the ones that proclaim vociferously, but the ones that murmur softly to people in the darkness, reaffirming the inevitability of daybreak, that civilization outlives governmental systems, and that even in the most isolated moments, we're interlinked by empathetic vocalizations that understand both our tribulations and our aspirations. The potency of vocalizations disseminating sagacity through obscurity directs our attention to a subsequent narrative from that identical turbulent epoch. This time, it concerns an adolescent female whose unassuming intellect contributed to the safeguarding of erudition when the ruling powers endeavored to dictate public literacy and ideation. One would have discovered her each post-scholastic afternoon in the subterranean level of the Athens Municipal Library. An earnest quinquagenarian adolescent named Sophia Stratego, whose substantial spectacles and meticulous comportment rendered her almost imperceptible among the piles of literary volumes and archival repositories. Sophia's paterfamilias held the profession of bibliothecarian. Her matriarch instructed elementary education, and she had matured amidst a profusion of literature in a manner akin to how other youngsters were nurtured amidst playthings. When the authoritarian military regime intensified its grip upon scholastic institutions and literary dissemination in 1972, the library experienced progressively regular inspections from state functionaries bearing inventories of prescribed literary works, journals, and serial publications. Anything adjudged to be politically seditious, ethically dubious, or antithetical to the government's promulgated Hellenic principles had to be expunged from public access without delay. Sophia observed her paterfamilias disconsolately in case volumes he had dedicated years to meticulous classification and procurement. Philosophical treatises, geopolitical exegeses, contemporary belles lettres, and chronicles that diverged from sanctioned historical renditions, all vanished from accessible repositories. The bibliotheca grew palpably more subdued, diminished in scholarly effervescence, as visitors discovered a dearth of stimulating resources accessible for scholarly inquiry and recreational perusal. The Athens Municipal Library, a distinguished establishment nestled in the heart of the city, found itself particularly susceptible to the rigorous suppression of information imposed by the military junta that assumed command of Greece in 1967. Following a national decree issued in early 1968, the government commenced methodically pinpointing and expunging materials deemed politically subversive, morally corrupting, or ideologically dangerous from all public and academic libraries. Library staff, among them a bright and unassuming teenager named Sophia, received directives to compile lists of forbidden works and ensure their prompt removal from publicly accessible shelves and reading areas. The overarching objective was to purify the intellectual landscape, thereby ensuring that only officially sanctioned narratives and innocuous leisure literature were available for research and recreational perusal. However, Sophia discerned a crucial oversight that the government officials had not taken into account. The library's subterranean level contained vast repositories, maintenance facilities, and unattended nooks where generations of historical holdings resided in diverse states of cataloging and organization. These particular spaces were perpetually shrouded in grime and gloom, poorly illuminated, and typically bypassed by staff, save for essential upkeep tasks. Rather than permitting banned books to be annihilated or expatriated from the building entirely, Sophia commenced cultivating what she discreetly designated the alternative collection. Operating after school hours and during weekends, she meticulously relocated prescribed texts to clandestine sanctuaries throughout the basement, thereby constructing a shadow library that safeguarded scholarly assets for prospective utilization. Her system proved extraordinarily ingenious for an adolescent operating autonomously. She devised encrypted bibliographies that bore the outward appearance of standard upkeep logs, cataloging concealed items using numerical identifiers that simulated the categorization of heating equipment, electrical supplies, and general building maintenance items. Only she apprehended that Heating Unit 347 in truth signified an anthology of governmental thought secreted behind the edifice's main furnace. Sophia's clandestine undertaking necessitated meticulous forethought and unwavering secrecy. She was compelled to transport volumes incrementally, a few at a time, to elude discovery. She required finding concealment locations that were impervious to both incidental revelation and methodical investigation. Most importantly, she had to project an ordinary demeanor and conduct so that her clandestine preservation endeavors remained unsuspected. Her academic performance, in fact, demonstrably enhanced during this period, owing not to an absence of additional labor, but rather its very presence. Managing the hidden collection compelled her to cultivate sophisticated administrative proficiencies, learn about a wide array of scholarly disciplines, and understand intricate frameworks of data stewardship. Teachers commended her commitment to library work, completely unaware that her authentic tutelage was transpiring after hours in the subterranean levels. The foremost arduous dimension of Sophia's project was deciding which materials warranted precedence in safeguarding. Physical capacity was constrained, confidentiality held supreme importance, and she had to consider which books would be of paramount utility to prospective scholars and patrons. This demanded that she develop refined discernment regarding academic gravitas and chronological import. She commenced with philosophy and political theory, content that would be challenging to substitute, then incorporated belles lettres that encapsulated significant societal viewpoints, scientific texts that might be pivotal for subsequent scholarly inquiry, and historical documents that offered divergent accounts to sanctioned chronicles of happenings. Each concealed assemblage became a meticulously assembled anthology of academic liberty safeguarded from governmental suppression. Over time, Sophia forged connections with university students and faculty members who were contending with progressively curtailed investigatory assets. While she was unable to grant immediate entry to banned materials, she commenced imparting discreet counsel about unconventional investigative methodologies and innovative bibliographical tactics that enabled earnest academics to persist in their endeavors notwithstanding governmental prescriptions. Professor Janis Kinos, who taught classical studies at the University of Athens, subsequently recollected dialogues with an uncommonly erudite adolescent bibliotheca aide who appeared to grasp investigatory requirements more profoundly than numerous seasoned information specialists. Sophia would listen attentively to his research challenges and somehow contrived to propose methodologies or materials that materialized as remarkably advantageous. Her assistance was always oblique and thoughtfully credible. She would perhaps articulate that certain earlier renderings encompassed interpretations that were absent from contemporary publications, or suggest that synoptic scrutiny might necessitate delving into texts antedating contemporary editorial revisions. Scholars grew to heed Sophia's ostensibly incidental remarks about investigative procedures. The hidden collection expanded incrementally yet consistently throughout 1972 and 1973. Sophia's basement became a clandestine archive of intellectual freedom, safeguarded by a singular, resolute adolescent who apprehended that information, once eradicated, could prove irreclaimable. She operated in complete solitude, refraining from enlisting assistants who might jeopardize confidentiality through inadvertent revelation. Her most audacious resolution materialized when government officials proclaimed an exhaustive audit of all library materials, encompassing repositories and subterranean archives. Sophia recognized that even her meticulously concealed resources stood vulnerable to exposure during methodical inspection. She was compelled to devise an even more impenetrable safeguarding technique. Leveraging proficiencies acquired through managing the hidden collection, Sophia commenced the micrographic reproduction of the preeminent content. The library's microfilm equipment was principally employed for the archival retention of journalistic publications and historical records. But she secured entry outside regular operational periods by offering her assistance for standard conservation initiatives. Her microfilm collection could be accommodated within significantly more compact confines and concealed with greater efficacy than physical books. The exhaustive inspection materialized in early 1974, with government officials executing meticulous examinations of areas that had previously been unsubjected to methodical scrutiny. Sophia observed apprehensively as auditors scrutinized storage rooms, maintenance areas, and unattended nooks where subordinate concealed items had been placed. Some materials were uncovered and impounded, but Sophia's most ingenious concealment locations endured uncompromised. More importantly, her microfilm collection safeguarded the intellectual essence of works that were tangibly located and expropriated. The intellectual substance persevered even when discrete volumes were annihilated. As geopolitical frictions intensified throughout 1974 and the military regime's dominion commenced its decline, Sophia realized her fortuitous stance. She had safeguarded documents that would prove indispensable for comprehending the era of suppression and for reconstructing academic liberty once governmental constraints were abrogated. Her adolescent project had become an invaluable chronological asset. When the authoritarian regime ultimately disintegrated in 1974, Sophia confronted the intricate undertaking of incrementally reintroducing concealed content to public availability without eschewing disclosure of the complete scope of her safeguarding endeavors. She had to exercise caution to avert governmental scrutiny that might engender difficulties for her kin or the institutional management. Her solution was quintessentially systematic and forbearing. Over the subsequent months, formerly prescribed texts started to resurface in the library's collection as though they had been misfiled amidst standard administrative processes rather than intentionally sequestered due to ideological imperatives. Sophia's meticulous record-keeping enabled her to progressively reinstate items without inciting doubt regarding organized safeguarding initiatives. University researchers commenced observing that the Athens Municipal Library seemed to possess extraordinarily comprehensive assortments of materials that were challenging to locate in other venues. Scholars who had grappled with constrained assets during the junta years found that their research were able to recommence with entry to materials they'd presumed irrevocably vanished. Sophia refrained from publicly divulging her preservation activities. Even subsequent to the reinstatement of civil liberties, she persisted in her employment at the Bibliotheca throughout her collegiate period, ultimately attaining the status of a seasoned information professional whose proficiency in data stewardship and archival maintenance was profoundly venerated yet perpetually enigmatic. Many years subsequently, when scholars examining the military regime's tenure probed how certain intellectual resources had endured methodical suppression, they uncovered indications of ingenious safeguarding initiatives that implied comprehensive strategizing and extraordinary administrative acumen. The individual responsible for orchestrating these endeavors persisted as an enigma. Sophia, then occupying the directorial position of the library, would periodically exhibit a faint grin when junior associates expressed astonishment at the library's historical collections and speculated how such an abundance of content had persevered through such a difficult period. She would merely remark that books, like ideas, were more resilient to obliteration than those in power typically comprehended, and that resolute individuals possessed the capacity to secure that which held utmost significance. Her enduring contribution extended beyond the safeguarded items to the profound comprehension she cultivated about the interconnection between erudition and liberty. She had learned that academic autonomy necessitated not merely entry to data, but vigilant guardianship of such entry by individuals prepared to undertake personal hazards for communal advantage. Conceivably, the most significant repositories of learning aren't the ones with the most magnificent edifices or the broadest public holdings, but the ones sustained by persons who apprehend that safeguarding information occasionally constitutes an understated gesture of defiance, and that the most sagacious custodians of intellectual freedom are often the ones who operate clandestinely in obscurity, guaranteeing the endurance of verity until its secure reemergence into illumination. The quiet heroism of preserving knowledge in dangerous times brings us to an earlier period of Greek history when different kinds of courage were needed during the Great War. In the muddy trenches of the Macedonian front in 1917, there served a soldier named Sergeant Palomos, whose approach to warfare was unlike anything his comrades had ever witnessed. This individual, a Greek soldier, exhibited an extraordinary demeanor and tactical prowess that left a lasting impression on all who encountered him, embodying a unique form of military leadership amidst the brutal realities of the First World War. You would have found him during the bitter winter months, not in the officers' quarters where warmth and comfort might be expected, but sharing the coldest, most exposed positions with the newest recruits and the most frightened conscripts. His presence among the most vulnerable members of his unit underscored a profound sense of solidarity and a commitment to their well-being, setting him apart from conventional military figures. Palomos had volunteered for military service despite being older than most soldiers, claiming he felt a personal responsibility to defend Greek territory against foreign occupation. This selfless act of patriotism, undertaken at an age when many might seek to avoid the front lines, highlighted his unwavering dedication to his homeland and its people. His name meant war in ancient Greek, which amused his fellow soldiers, but his behavior in combat confused them. Palomos was fearless under fire, seemed to anticipate enemy movements with uncanny accuracy, and had an extraordinary ability to keep men alive in impossible situations. Yet, he took no joy in killing, and showed unusual respect for enemy soldiers, even those trying to kill him, a paradox that baffled his comrades and distinguished his character. The trenches along the Macedonian front were a nightmare of mud, disease, boredom, and sudden terror. Men died from artillery bombardments, sniper fire, poison gas, and infections that spread rapidly in the unsanitary conditions. Morale was constantly fragile. Discipline required constant reinforcement, and survival depended largely on luck and the competence of immediate commanders. This grim reality served as the backdrop for Palomos's remarkable leadership, making his achievements all the more extraordinary. Palomos became a sergeant, not through political connections or formal military training, but because soldiers instinctively followed his leadership during crisis situations. His rise through the ranks was a testament to his innate ability to command respect and inspire confidence, a natural authority that transcended official protocols. When enemy attacks came, he seemed to know exactly where to position men for maximum protection. When supply lines were disrupted, he found ways to keep his unit fed and equipped. When medical care was unavailable, his knowledge of field medicine saved lives that would otherwise have been lost. These instances demonstrated his multifaceted competence, ranging from tactical acumen to practical resourcefulness and essential medical expertise. What made his leadership truly unusual was his attitude toward combat itself. Most effective military commanders either developed emotional detachment from violence or learned to channel anger and aggression into tactical advantages. Palomos seemed to understand war as a tragic necessity that required maximum skill precisely because the consequences of incompetence were so devastating. This philosophical approach to warfare underscored his unique perspective, viewing conflict not as an arena for glory, but as a grave responsibility. Private Stavros Demetriou, who served under Palomos for 8 months, later wrote in his diary, "The sergeant fights like a man who has seen every possible form of warfare and learned that the only victory worth achieving is the one that costs the fewest lives on both sides. He kills when necessary, but never with hatred. And he risks himself constantly to protect soldiers who haven't yet learned how to protect themselves." This personal account vividly captured the essence of Palomos's leadership, highlighting his strategic empathy and protective instincts. Palomos had an unusual relationship with the tactical aspects of trench warfare. His understanding of the complexities of the battlefield seemed to stem from an intrinsic grasp of military strategy. He understood terrain, weather, and enemy psychology in ways that seemed to come from extensive experience. Though military records showed he had no previous combat service, his ability to predict artillery patterns, identify weak points in enemy positions, and coordinate complex defensive maneuvers suggested professional training that exceeded his official background. This apparent discrepancy between his documented history and his demonstrable expertise only added to the enigma surrounding his character. During quiet periods between major engagements, when most soldiers spent time writing letters home, gambling, or trying to find temporary entertainment, Palomos would walk among the men, checking on their physical and emotional condition. His proactive engagement with his soldiers' welfare during these lulls in fighting reflected a profound understanding of the psychological toll of war. He seemed to understand that successful military units required attention to morale, health, and group cohesion as much as tactical skill and individual courage. This holistic view of unit effectiveness, recognizing the interconnectedness of physical, mental, and social well-being, was remarkably progressive for its time. His approach to discipline was particularly effective. Instead of relying on punishment and intimidation, Polomos maintained order through personal example and genuine concern for his soldiers' welfare. This compassionate yet firm method fostered an environment of trust and mutual respect, cultivating a highly disciplined and cohesive unit. Men followed his orders because they trusted his judgment and knew he would never ask them to take risks he wouldn't take himself. This unwavering confidence in their leader's integrity and self-sacrifice was a cornerstone of his authority, inspiring unwavering loyalty among his troops. The most remarkable example of his leadership came during the autumn offensive of 1917, when Greek forces were ordered to advance against heavily fortified enemy positions, despite inadequate artillery support and insufficient reserves. This perilous assignment presented a critical test of his abilities and moral compass. The attack was clearly poorly planned and likely to result in enormous casualties for minimal strategic gain. Recognizing the catastrophic potential of the original plan, Polomos faced a daunting ethical dilemma: whether to obey orders blindly or to intervene for the sake of his men. Rather than simply following orders that would have led to needless slaughter, Polomos spent the night before the attack studying terrain maps, analyzing enemy defensive patterns, and developing alternative tactical approaches. His diligent and meticulous preparation underscored his commitment to minimizing loss of life, even in the face of direct command. He proposed a modified assault plan that achieved the same strategic objectives while significantly reducing casualties by exploiting weaknesses in enemy positions that higher command hadn't noticed. This innovative and insightful proposal demonstrated his superior strategic thinking and his ability to discern critical details overlooked by others. His modified plan required incredible precision and coordination among different units. But Polomos had built sufficient trust and communication among his men that they could execute complex maneuvers under combat conditions. The strong bonds of trust he had fostered within his unit proved instrumental in the successful execution of this intricate operation. The attack succeeded with casualties far below what the original plan would have cost, and several strategic positions were captured that weren't even included in the initial objectives. The outcome of this modified assault was a resounding triumph, not only in achieving military objectives, but more importantly, in preserving countless lives. Military authorities were initially suspicious of tactical innovations that hadn't been officially approved, but the results were too impressive to ignore. The undeniable success of Polomos's unconventional approach compelled even the most rigid military minds to acknowledge his genius. Polomos received commendations for outstanding leadership and was offered promotion to officer rank, which he quietly declined, saying he preferred working directly with enlisted soldiers rather than managing from headquarters positions. His refusal of promotion further highlighted his humble nature and his unwavering dedication to the well-being of the frontline soldiers. As winter approached and fighting intensified, Polomos's unit became known throughout their sector for unusually high survival rates, effective combat performance, and remarkable morale. The reputation of his unit spread, a testament to his exceptional leadership during increasingly brutal conditions. Despite the harsh conditions, soldiers from other units began requesting transfers to serve under his command, and officers started consulting him about tactical problems they couldn't solve through conventional military doctrine. His influence extended beyond his own unit, becoming a sought-after source of wisdom and expertise within the broader military structure. His reputation extended beyond his own army. Enemy soldiers captured during raids often mentioned the Greek unit that fought with exceptional skill, but treated prisoners with unexpected dignity. Several captured officers expressed puzzlement about facing opponents who seemed to understand warfare better than their own professional military leaders. This recognition from the enemy camp further solidified his legendary status, underscoring his unique blend of tactical brilliance and ethical conduct. During the final months of the war, as military stalemate turned into negotiations and eventual armistice, Polomos began preparing his men for transition back to civilian life. Recognizing the profound psychological impact of prolonged conflict, he extended his leadership beyond the battlefield. He organized informal discussions about dealing with war memories, helped men plan for economic adjustment after military service, and encouraged them to maintain the mutual support relationships they developed during combat. These initiatives demonstrated his foresight and empathy, addressing the often overlooked challenges of post-war reintegration. His post-war preparation was as thoughtful and effective as his combat leadership had been. This comprehensive approach to soldier welfare, encompassing both active duty and civilian transition, cemented his legacy as a truly exceptional leader. When peace was finally declared and demobilization began, Polomos disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. His abrupt departure added another layer of mystery to his already enigmatic persona. Military records showed that he had completed his service obligations and been officially discharged. But attempts to locate him for Veterans Affairs or reunions were unsuccessful. He seemed to have simply vanished into the civilian population, leaving behind only the profound impact of his actions. His former soldiers maintained contact with each other and occasionally gathered to remember their wartime experiences. They would always toast Sergeant Polomos wherever he is and share stories about his exceptional leadership. The enduring camaraderie among his former troops served as a living testament to his indelible influence. Many credited him with their survival, both physical and psychological, through one of the most difficult periods in modern Greek history. His guidance had been a beacon of hope and resilience in the darkest of times, shaping the lives of those under his command in profound ways. Decades later, military historians studying the Great War period found evidence of tactical innovations and leadership approaches that seemed remarkably advanced for their time. The Macedonian front had been a laboratory for military techniques that wouldn't become standard doctrine until much later conflicts. This retrospective analysis validated the groundbreaking nature of Polomos's methods. Some researchers suggested that certain Greek units had achieved success rates that exceeded what should have been possible given their resources and strategic situation. These unexplained successes seemed to cluster around specific commanders whose background and training didn't match their apparent expertise. This historical anomaly further pointed to the unique contributions of figures like Polomos. Veterans of the Macedonian campaign, when interviewed in their old age, consistently mentioned leaders who had combined traditional courage with unexpected wisdom, treating warfare as a tragic responsibility that required the highest levels of skill and ethical consideration. Their collective memories painted a consistent picture of a new kind of military leadership. They spoke of commanders who understood that true military strength came from protecting lives rather than simply taking them. This profound insight into the essence of military power resonated deeply with those who had experienced the horrors of war firsthand. Perhaps the greatest warriors aren't those who love battle, but those who understand it so completely that they can minimize its costs while achieving necessary objectives. Maybe the most divine aspect of military leadership is knowing when violence is truly necessary, how to apply it most effectively, and how to preserve the humanity of everyone involved, including the enemy. Sometimes the god of war serves best by teaching mortals how to fight with both skill and mercy. This concluding reflection encapsulates the enduring philosophical implications of Palomos's extraordinary legacy, suggesting a higher purpose for military prowess rooted in compassion and strategic wisdom. The god of war serves best by teaching mortals how to fight with both skill and mercy. Dionysus and the vineyard that survived the drought. The profound insight that life's continuation is often best secured through deep comprehension guides us now to a distinct narrative of endurance. Our focus shifts to the arid, sun-drenched landscapes of Crete, where a calamitous drought gripped the island in 1993. Within a quaint village perched high above the azure Aegean Sea resided a vintner named Janus Alargos. His particular vineyard, against all odds, inexplicably prospered even as adjacent agricultural estates succumbed and languished beneath the unyielding glare of the Mediterranean sun. So one could reliably observe him at the break of each day, traversing deliberately along the expansive rows of grapevines, plants that, by all conventional expectations, ought to have been visibly strained and severely distressed. He meticulously inspected every individual specimen, demonstrating the profound diligence of an individual who grasped that sustained existence was predicated upon discerning even the most minute particulars. Janus had received stewardship of this vineyard as a legacy from his esteemed grandfather. Yet, his distinctive methodology for viticulture appeared to seamlessly integrate time-honored practices with novel advancements, principles conspicuously absent from any formal curriculum of agricultural instruction. The arid conditions commenced in the nascent days of spring, persisting relentlessly for successive months without any respite. Consequently, numerous other vineyards scattered across the island witnessed their grapevines exhibiting acute stress, their precious fruit withering away, and their seasonal yields plummeting to negligible quantities. Farmers, driven to desperation, resorted to sinking deeper boreholes and establishing costly irrigation networks. Nevertheless, they could only observe with profound helplessness as their substantial financial outlays proved insufficient to salvage their plantings, which were succumbing to desiccation at a pace swifter than any applied hydration could counteract. In stark contrast, Janus's vineyard maintained an enigmatic state of robust health. His grapevines displayed none of the characteristic indicators of drought-induced strain. There was no telltale discoloration of leaves, no discernible impediment to growth, and certainly no discernible reduction in the proliferation of fruit. Individuals who traversed his estate consistently expressed disbelief, struggling to reconcile the verdant vitality before their eyes with the identical, severe environmental adversities that were simultaneously decimating agricultural endeavors across the entire geographical expanse. Maria Papadakis, the region's dedicated agricultural extension agent, commenced a series of frequent visits. Her initial presumption was that Janus's success stemmed either from remarkably efficient water conservation techniques or from unusually fertile soil characteristics within his property. What she encountered, however, was a vineyard seemingly managed by tenets that she found impossible to categorize or elucidate using the established frameworks of conventional agricultural science. Janus graciously entertained her inquiries, yet his subsequent explanations proved to be exasperatingly imprecise and lacking in specific detail. He articulated concepts such as attuning oneself to the inherent requirements of the grapevines and harmonizing with the innate cadences of nature, rather than furnishing precise technical specifications concerning irrigation timetables, nutrient supplementation protocols, or proactive pest control methodologies. When pressed for more granular information, he would typically respond with a gentle smile, positing that the successful cultivation of grapes necessitated an equal measure of intuitive understanding alongside conventional horticultural expertise. Over the course of her numerous observations, Maria discerned that the vineyard was being managed with an exceptional degree of sensitivity towards nuanced environmental variables, elements that the majority of cultivators either disregarded entirely or simply failed to perceive. Janus appeared to possess an innate comprehension of the localized microclimates existing throughout his estate. He meticulously adapted his cultivation techniques for distinct sections, tailoring them according to minute oscillations in soil exposure and atmospheric circulation that were scarcely discernible to casual external observers. Furthermore, his operational schedule diverged significantly from the conventional patterns and established recommendations typically found in standard agricultural guides. He was known to engage in strenuous labor during the cooler hours of the evening, opting to rest during periods of the day when his agricultural peers were typically most industrious. His precise scheduling for a multitude of vineyard operations, including pruning, soil preparation, and the intricate arrangements for harvest, appeared to be dictated by considerations extending far beyond mere meteorological predictions and fixed calendar appointments. The social ambiance prevalent at the vineyard was every bit as distinctive as its remarkable agricultural prosperity. Notwithstanding the pervasive anxiety that the drought conditions inflicted upon the majority of rural communities, Janus's estate evolved into an informal nexus, a place where neighbors discovered compelling motives to call, offer assistance with sundry chores, and partake in communal meals that, through some inexplicable grace, invariably expanded to accommodate any individual who arrived at the table. These spontaneous assemblages were never formally orchestrated, yet they materialized with consistent regularity across the entirety of the growing season. Individuals would frequent the vineyard to engage in dialogues concerning their agricultural predicaments, solicit guidance regarding their own floundering harvests, or merely to secure a fleeting respite from the palpable apprehension that widespread economic adversity was engendering across the entire territory. Janus possessed an extraordinary aptitude for assisting his guests in achieving a state of tranquility and in gaining a renewed outlook on their personal hardships. Dialogues conducted within his vineyard frequently veered towards profound philosophical contemplation, delving into inquiries regarding humanity's intrinsic connection to the natural world, the enduring significance of ancestral agricultural methodologies, and the deeper, often spiritual dimensions inherent in the cultivation of sustenance. Attendees consistently departed these profound exchanges feeling invigorated and imbued with a renewed sense of optimism, notwithstanding the persistent practical obstacles they continued to confront. Father Costas, the revered village priest, keenly observed that families grappling with the profound pressures induced by the drought invariably appeared to regain their emotional composure and inner balance subsequent to periods spent at Janus's vineyard. The confluence of engaging conversations, communal repasts, and cooperative labor collectively fostered an invaluable atmosphere of mutual community assistance, which in turn significantly aided individuals in navigating the pervasive economic precariousness and the formidable ecological adversities they faced. As the relentless drought persisted into its second arduous year, the disparity between Janus's flourishing vineyard and the beleaguered adjacent properties grew increasingly pronounced. Consequently, agricultural officials initiated a more methodical examination of his operational practices, harboring aspirations of identifying replicable techniques that could be disseminated amongst other cultivators confronting comparable environmental hardships. Their comprehensive inquiries, however, yielded observations that were intriguing, yet ultimately inconclusive. Soil analyses indicated a commendable mineral composition, though nothing overtly superior when juxtaposed with contiguous land parcels. Furthermore, water consumption appeared to be remarkably below the average, rather than above it, a fact that certainly did not elucidate the vineyard's evident vitality. Even sophisticated weather monitoring apparatuses failed to detect any anomalous microclimatic phenomena that might account for the demonstrably superior growing conditions. The paramount distinction, it appeared, resided in vineyard management practices that defied easy quantification or straightforward replication. Janus's astute decisions regarding timing, his distinctive philosophies concerning plant nourishment, and his judicious methods for sustaining soil vigor represented a harmonious synthesis of venerable traditional knowledge and inventive approaches. These innovations seemed to emanate from an unparalleled grasp of plant physiology and intricate environmental interdependencies. His elucidations, as before, remained exasperatingly devoid of technical specificity. When probed about his water conservation strategy, he might articulate that he endeavored to foster the vine's capacity to forge more profound symbiotic connections with the earth. Similarly, when queried about his unorthodox pruning regimens, he would clarify that his objective was to empower each individual plant to discover its intrinsic resilience, rather than imposing contrived or unnatural growth configurations. Notwithstanding the persistently abstract nature of his explanations, other agriculturalists commenced integrating facets of Janus's methodology into their own operations. They discovered that even a partial adoption yielded tangible improvements in their outcomes. His steadfast emphasis on meticulous observation, adaptive timing, and a comprehensive, holistic conceptualization of vineyard stewardship proved instrumental in aiding his neighbors to devise more efficacious strategies for confronting the drought. The vineyard's harvest during the second year of the drought was not merely successful, it attained an exceptional standard of quality. While the majority of regional wine output suffered severe contractions, Janus cultivated grapes that ultimately yielded wines of extraordinary profundity and intricate flavor profiles. Consequently, discerning wine merchants from Athens initiated specialized journeys to procure his limited yet highly coveted production. This burgeoning success, however, simultaneously engendered novel complexities, as the heightened scrutiny attracted an influx of additional visitors, a proliferation of inquiries, and an augmented demand to either thoroughly explicate or commercially exploit his unique methodologies. Janus navigated this intensified attention with his customary composure and inherent grace, extending a warm reception to genuinely curious individuals while deftly circumventing overt efforts to capitalize upon or unduly sensationalize his remarkable accomplishments. As the third year unfolded under the persistent dominion of drought conditions, regional administrative bodies formally requested Janus to conduct specialized workshops for fellow farmers who were contending with climate-related adversities. His instructional sessions proved immensely popular, yet their content remained distinctly unconventional, emphasizing the cultivation of an intuitive grasp of agricultural ecosystems rather than the mere application of discrete technical remedies. Attendees of these workshops frequently perceived his counsel as challenging to put into practice, primarily because it necessitated the development of profound, personal connections with their respective land and crops, rather than the rote adherence to prescribed, standardized protocols. Nevertheless, those cultivators who dedicated the requisite time and effort to this introspective approach generally observed ameliorated outcomes, even if they were unable to comprehensively articulate the precise scientific rationale behind the enhanced efficacy of their modified practices. Ultimately, when customary rainfall patterns were re-established, Janus's vineyard seamlessly adapted to the altered environmental circumstances, steadfastly preserving its inherent vitality and prolific output. While numerous other agricultural enterprises grappled with the arduous process of recuperating from the ravages of the drought, his pioneering example had been instrumental in solidifying innovative paradigms for sustainable agriculture, methodologies that demonstrated enduring worth far exceeding the immediate period of crisis. Consequently, the vineyard maintained its esteemed status as a pivotal regional hub for agricultural enlightenment and communal congregation. Janus aged gracefully, eventually delegating managerial responsibilities to a cherished nephew who had assimilated his intricate methods through protracted years of diligent observation and practical engagement, rather than through any formal scholastic instruction. Agricultural researchers continued their rigorous study of the property for many years thereafter, meticulously documenting advancements in sustainable farming that appeared to presciently address climate-related challenges long before they escalated into widespread global concerns. The vineyard thus ascended to the status of an exemplary model for agricultural approaches that harmoniously integrated time-honored wisdom with highly adaptive management strategies. Visitors frequently remarked upon the estate's singular ambiance, a pervasive sense of abundance and quiet festivity, even amidst trying periods, as if the vineyard itself held an enduring recollection of the vital interplay between dedicated human endeavor and nature's profound generosity. People who encountered this remarkable transformation found themselves embraced not merely as clients or pupils, but as active participants in an enduring testament to life's profound resilience. It became clear that perhaps the most invaluable yields are not exclusively the tangible crops we gather from the soil, but rather the robust communities we painstakingly cultivate, and the profound wisdom we generously impart to one another during times of severe adversity. One might even argue that the most exceptional vintages do not solely originate from perfectly ripened grapes, but emerge from a deeper comprehension that genuine abundance is entirely attainable, even amidst the most challenging seasons, and that the simple act of sharing what little we possess profoundly multiplies, rather than diminishes, the precious gifts we have been granted. Indeed, the ancient deity of viticulture and revelry, Dionysus, sometimes imparts his most potent lessons not through boisterous festivities, but through quiet, patient demonstrations of how profound joy can undeniably blossom and flourish, even when external circumstances appear overwhelmingly insurmountable. At that specific juncture in history, Greece found itself wrestling with one of its most profoundly arduous periods, having just emerged from the devastation of World War II, yet still far from initiating any true national recovery. The year 1947 bore witness to a nation still reeling from pervasive hunger, a catastrophic economic collapse that had crippled its infrastructure, and the widespread social fragmentation that was a direct, agonizing consequence of years of brutal occupation and a bitter civil conflict. The fabric of society was torn, and the spirit of its people was severely tested by these relentless hardships. It was within this desolate landscape, in a secluded small mountain village known as Spetses, that a woman named Dimitra Karpou resided. Her unassuming garden plot, humble in its appearance, paradoxically became the crucible and cornerstone for an extraordinary, groundbreaking experiment in collective community survival. One would invariably discover her at the very first blush of dawn each day, diligently attending to a compact patch of land that, against all odds and conventional wisdom, appeared to yield an impossibly abundant harvest, defying the very nature of its surroundings. Despite the inherent challenges posed by the stubbornly rocky soil and the unforgiving, harsh mountain climate, Dimitra had courageously returned to her ancestral village. This return was compelled by immense personal tragedy, having suffered the profound loss of her beloved husband and their home in Athens during the relentless years of the war. She arrived with virtually no material possessions, carrying only the invaluable agricultural wisdom meticulously passed down through generations from her grandmother, coupled with an unyielding determination to forge something profoundly life-sustaining from whatever meager resources she could possibly muster. The village, upon her arrival, was in an acutely desperate state. A significant number of its young men had either perished in the brutal conflict or had been forced to migrate elsewhere in a futile search for work. The remaining families comprised predominantly elderly individuals, widows bearing heavy burdens, and vulnerable children, all struggling relentlessly to eke out an existence on severely limited resources and extensively damaged land. The traditional farming methodologies, once sufficient, were now woefully inadequate, failing to produce even the most basic nutritional sustenance required for survival. Dimitra commenced her formidable endeavor with a modest plot of land located behind the derelict, abandoned house she had inherited from distant relatives. The soil there was notoriously poor, riddled with innumerable rocks, and profoundly depleted of nutrients from many years of utter neglect. Most of the villagers, having long since surrendered to despair, readily assumed that any serious agricultural pursuit was utterly futile under such unforgiving conditions. Consequently, they channeled their severely limited energy into activities such as foraging for wild edibles, raising a few small livestock, and anxiously awaiting whatever scant assistance might eventually trickle down from various relief organizations. However, Dimitra approached this daunting challenge with a rare combination of systematic patience and a remarkably profound understanding of the intricate symbiotic relationships between plants, soil, and the prevailing climate. She dedicated entire weeks simply to meticulous observation of the land, carefully studying its subtle drainage patterns, noting precisely where indigenous wild plants managed to thrive, and painstakingly identifying unique microclimates that might potentially support diverse varieties of crops. Her neighbors, witnessing her seemingly unproductive focus, often dismissed her actions, convinced she was merely squandering precious time that ought to have been devoted to more immediate, pressing survival tasks. Her very first, yet profoundly impactful innovation involved the ingenious creation of nutrient-rich compost from organic materials that everyone else in the village unhesitatingly considered utterly worthless waste. Kitchen scraps, the myriad fallen leaves from trees, animal manure, and even human waste, once properly processed and managed, were meticulously collected. Every conceivable organic fragment was transformed into potential, potent fertilizer for soil that had tragically gone without proper nourishment for many years. These nascent compost piles were managed with extraordinary care, ensuring optimal decomposition processes while rigorously preventing the creation of any potential health hazards for the community. Within the span of her very first growing season, Dimitra's small, diligently tended garden began to yield an astonishing bounty of vegetables. These were notably larger, visibly healthier, and far more flavorful than anything that had been cultivated in the entire region for many years prior. Her undeniable success quickly garnered significant attention from her skeptical neighbors, who, with growing curiosity, began to approach her, posing earnest questions about her innovative methods and tentatively requesting advice regarding their own small, struggling agricultural projects. Instead of jealously guarding her invaluable knowledge or attempting to financially profit from her remarkable success, Dimitra, with an inherent spirit of generosity, began to freely share both her hard-won information and her precious resources with anyone who demonstrated a genuine and sincere interest in learning. She willingly offered seeds harvested from her most robust and productive plants, patiently assisted her neighbors in analyzing the specific conditions of their own soil, and provided clear, practical guidance on effective composting techniques, optimized planting schedules, and intelligent crop selection specifically tailored to the challenging local conditions. Her unique pedagogical approach to agricultural education proved to be remarkably effective and deeply impactful. Rather than engaging in abstract lectures about theoretical principles, Dimitra adopted a hands-on, immersive strategy. She warmly invited people to work directly alongside her within the vibrant confines of her garden, allowing them to learn through tangible, practical experience how different cultivation techniques consistently produced varying and discernible results. Her students could, therefore, immediately perceive the direct, undeniable connection between specific agricultural practices and the eventual successful outcomes. As an increasing number of families began to earnestly implement Dimitra's pioneering methods, the village's critical food security situation improved dramatically and rapidly. Gardens that had previously struggled to produce even minimal subsistence crops for survival began to yield abundant surplus vegetables, which could then be prudently preserved, judiciously traded with other communities, or generously shared with those families who were still struggling to establish their own reliable food production systems. The significant agricultural improvements spearheaded by Dimitra consequently unfurled a cascade of opportunities for other burgeoning economic activities within the village. Women, seizing these newfound possibilities, began the industrious work of preserving surplus vegetables and crafting various value-added products that could be successfully sold in the bustling regional markets. Children, too, became actively involved, participating in crucial tasks such as meticulous seed saving and diligent plant care, thereby developing invaluable agricultural skills while concurrently making tangible contributions to their family's ongoing survival. Even the elderly villagers, whose wisdom had often been overlooked in the crisis, found their traditional knowledge and time-honored practices revalued and reintegrated as Dimitra skillfully wove old farming wisdom with her innovative new techniques, creating a powerful synergy. However, Dimitra's most profoundly significant innovation was the visionary establishment of communal gardens. These plots were managed collectively by the entire village, rather than being parceled out and managed individually. Families contributed their labor, seeds, and various resources according to their respective abilities and capacities. Crucially, everyone shared equitably in the harvest, irrespective of their specific contributions, embodying a true spirit of collective solidarity. This remarkably inclusive approach guaranteed that even families lacking their own land or sufficient resources could consistently access fresh, nutritious vegetables. The implementation of this community garden system necessitated a level of careful organization and robust social cooperation that had regrettably been absent from the village for many years, shattered by the war. Dimitra deftly facilitated regular meetings where families collaboratively planned crop selections, meticulously organized work schedules, and fairly determined harvest distribution. These gatherings quickly evolved into vital social events, serving as powerful catalysts that meticulously rebuilt and strengthened the community connections that had been so severely disrupted by the ravages of war and pervasive economic hardship. By the year 1948, a mere year after Dimitra's arrival, the village had not only achieved the remarkable feat of adequately feeding its own population, but was also generating substantial surplus crops. This abundance allowed them to engage in vital trade with neighboring communities, exchanging their produce for other essential necessities. The extraordinary transformation from the precipice of near starvation to robust food security had been accomplished in less than 2 full growing seasons, and astonishingly, had been achieved entirely through the ingenious utilization of local resources and the collective effort of its inhabitants. Government officials and representatives from various relief organizations, hearing of this unparalleled success, began making visits to the village. Their purpose was to meticulously study how such a dramatic and swift improvement had been realized with minimal external assistance. They discovered a thriving community that had not only developed sophisticated agricultural techniques, but had also cultivated effective social cooperation and innovative economic strategies, a model that held immense potential for replication in other struggling areas across the nation. Dimitra's humble explanations consistently underscored the paramount importance of practical cooperation and patient, meticulous observation, rather than attributing their success to any revolutionary, secret techniques or extraordinary, special resources. She steadfastly maintained that their achievements stemmed directly from the systematic application of traditional knowledge, the effective and equitable sharing of resources, and, most importantly, the unwavering community commitment to mutual support throughout their arduous journey through difficult times. Consequently, the village rapidly evolved into a vital training center, attracting representatives from numerous other communities eager to learn the agricultural and organizational methods that had proven so remarkably successful under such challenging conditions. Dimitra, alongside other experienced villagers, provided comprehensive instruction that seamlessly combined crucial technical information with invaluable lessons on fostering social cooperation and nurturing effective community leadership. As Greece gradually embarked upon its broader national economic recovery, Dimitra's village was exceptionally well positioned to capitalize on emerging new opportunities. This advantageous situation was a direct result of the solid foundation of food security and robust community organization that had been so diligently established during the preceding crisis years. The agricultural surplus they consistently generated could be wisely invested in other burgeoning economic activities, and the deeply ingrained habits of cooperation, forged in adversity, made it considerably easier to organize and execute further collective projects, propelling the village forward. Dimitra, though continuing her invaluable agricultural work, progressively shifted her primary focus toward meticulously documenting and systematically teaching the innovative methods that had been so successfully developed during the emergency period. She possessed a profound understanding that the invaluable knowledge and resilient social systems they had painstakingly created needed to be carefully preserved and disseminated for the benefit of future communities inevitably facing similar daunting challenges. Her meticulously kept notebooks, filled with practical insights and detailed observations, soon became indispensable resources for agricultural extension services and vital community development programs spanning the entirety of Greece. The potent combination of practical technical information and astute social organization strategies offered a compelling model for rural development, one that powerfully emphasized the ingenious utilization of local resources and the inherent capacity of the community itself, rather than fostering a debilitating dependence on external assistance. Throughout the 1950s, even as widespread agricultural mechanization and rapid industrial development began to fundamentally transform the fabric of rural Greek society, Dimitra's village steadfastly maintained its cherished tradition of community gardens and its effective system of cooperative resource management. These enduring practices continued to provide a reliable source of food security and fostered strong social cohesion, even as other aspects of village life gradually modernized and evolved. The young people who matured within the village during this period of recovery carried Dimitra's profound lessons with them as they eventually migrated to burgeoning cities or established their own families elsewhere. Her enduring influence thus subtly spread through informal, organic networks of individuals who had personally learned that communities possess the inherent strength to overcome even the most difficult times through the unwavering power of patient cooperation and the intelligent, judicious utilization of their local resources. Elegant application of locally available resources. In her twilight years, Dimitra frequently mused upon how the gravest adversity faced by the village had, paradoxically, transmuted into its most formidable advantage. The existential crisis that had imperiled the very subsistence of every inhabitant had, by necessity, compelled the genesis of agricultural and communal frameworks, which ultimately proved more enduring and gratifying than the arrangements that had prevailed prior to the onset of the formidable hardships. Upon her passing in 1967, at the venerable age of 73, the villagers consecrated her memory by meticulously preserving the communal gardens she had painstakingly established, and by steadfastly perpetuating the spirit of cooperative traditions she had so instrumental in nurturing. Her unadorned gravestone bore a succinct yet profound epitaph. She imparted to us the profound truth that the earth yields sufficient sustenance for all, provided we comprehend the art of proper supplication and judicious apportionment. Perhaps the most fecund terrain is not defined by the richness of its soil, but rather by the collaborative spirit of a community, where individuals grasp that collective survival is inextricably linked to the dedicated contribution of each member. It may well be that the most bountiful harvests do not emanate from the expansive yields of individual plots, but rather from the cumulative sagacity that blossoms when neighbors unite in common purpose through arduous seasons. Occasionally, the benevolent goddess of grain and verdant growth imparts her most potent lessons not through miraculous abundance, but through patient, persistent demonstrations that sufficiency is indeed attainable. When knowledge, concerted effort, and generous hearts are harmoniously conjoined. Industrial Greece in the pivotal year of 1922 was profoundly reshaped by the monumental population exchange that ensued in the wake of Greece's military setback in Asia Minor, an event during which hundreds of thousands of Greek refugees streamed into mainland Greece, inundating urban centers and engendering acute exigencies for shelter, employment, and viable economic avenues. Within the bustling port city of Piraeus, nestled amidst its myriad enterprises, there existed a modest metalworking establishment where an extraordinary synergy between a venerable master craftsman and recently displaced refugees gave rise to something truly remarkable. One would invariably have discovered him before the break of dawn each day, diligently kindling the roaring furnace in a workshop that, despite its unassuming dimensions, appeared to thrum with an improbably high level of activity. Michalis Volcano had been the proprietor of this esteemed foundry for a commendable 15 years, during which he had assiduously cultivated an impeccable reputation for producing metalwork that was simultaneously aesthetically pleasing and eminently functional. Bespoke ironwork commissioned by affluent families, essential repair services rendered to prominent shipping corporations, and specialized tools meticulously crafted for local artisans who demanded instruments of unparalleled precision. As the refugee vessels commenced their arrival in overwhelming succession, Michalis observed with profound empathy as families, divested of all possessions save for the garments they wore, endeavored to forge new existences in a nation whose resources were inherently constrained in their capacity to offer comprehensive succor. The majority of these refugees had, in their former lives in Asia Minor, been esteemed merchants, accomplished professionals, or highly skilled craftsmen, yet their impressive qualifications held scant currency in a novel country where they possessed no familiarity with the indigenous systems, nor had they cultivated established commercial relationships. Michalis, driven by an innate sense of compassion and foresight, made a pivotal decision that perplexed his long-standing clientele and engendered considerable apprehension among his business associates. Rather than steadfastly adhering to his lucrative custom work, he embarked upon a pioneering initiative, extending offers of employment and comprehensive training to refugees who possessed any prior experience in metalwork, tool manufacturing, or kindred crafts. His previously modest workshop underwent a transformative expansion, evolving into a cooperative endeavor that resolutely prioritized the creation of gainful employment opportunities over the mere maximization of financial profits. His inaugural cohort of refugee employees comprised men who had distinguished themselves as highly proficient metalworkers in the vibrant cities of Smyrna, Constantinople, and other urban centers prior to the cataclysmic population exchange. They brought with them an invaluable repository of knowledge concerning techniques and designs that were largely unknown in mainland Greece. thereby generating unprecedented opportunities for groundbreaking innovations that neither the refugees nor Michalis could have possibly conceived or developed in isolation. The workshop, now imbued with a renewed sense of purpose and enriched by diverse expertise, commenced the production of items that ingeniously melded traditional Greek metalworking methodologies with the intricate Ottoman and Byzantine techniques that the refugees vividly recalled from their former homelands. These innovative hybrid designs resulted in the creation of singularly unique products that resonated deeply with customers who sought artifacts that were simultaneously familiar in their essence and distinctive in their execution. Ironwork that eloquently mirrored Greece's rich and complex cultural heritage, rather than being confined solely to contemporary mainland styles. Georgios Kanikis, an individual who had successfully overseen a substantial metalwork operation in Trebizond before the exchange, contributed an invaluable wealth of knowledge pertaining to specialized alloys and sophisticated finishing techniques. This expertise enabled the workshop to undertake projects that had previously been beyond their technical capabilities. His profound understanding of advanced metallurgy seamlessly complemented Michalis's astute grasp of local markets and prevailing business practices, thereby forging a potent partnership that significantly augmented the skills and prospects of both men. As news of the workshop's burgeoning capabilities and its unwavering commitment to providing meaningful employment for refugees disseminated widely, orders began to materialize from unexpected and diverse sources. Other burgeoning refugee communities, striving to re-establish their lives, specifically requested metalwork for the new Orthodox churches being erected in their burgeoning neighborhoods. Concurrently, shipping companies expressed a pressing need for specialized equipment that harmoniously combined robust durability with the intricate decorative elements that the newly integrated refugee craftsmen were uniquely positioned to provide. The demonstrable success of the workshop thus created a virtuous cycle, generating further opportunities for additional refugee employment. However, the imperative of expansion necessitated more than simply augmenting the number of workers. The newly employed individuals required suitable housing. Their families, in turn, needed seamless integration into the existing local communities, and the burgeoning business itself demanded sophisticated organizational systems capable of accommodating rapid growth while simultaneously upholding stringent quality standards. Michalis's visionary solution, truly revolutionary for its era, transcended mere business expansion. Instead, he proactively facilitated the establishment of an intricate network of small metalworking cooperatives strategically located throughout the refugee neighborhoods of Piraeus. Each individual cooperative was expertly managed by seasoned refugee craftsmen, yet it maintained a vital umbilical connection to the original workshop, ensuring access to essential technical support, shared resources, and coordinated marketing strategies. This ingenious system empowered refugee families to cultivate economic independence while simultaneously preserving the invaluable traditional craft knowledge they had painstakingly carried from their former homes. The cooperatives adeptly produced both utilitarian items indispensable to the daily lives of the refugee communities and specialized products that could be successfully marketed to broader segments throughout Greece. The network's most profoundly innovative characteristic lay in its enlightened approach to skill development and the reciprocal sharing of knowledge. Experienced craftsmen, hailing from disparate refugee communities, generously imparted their specialized expertise to workers from other backgrounds, fostering a dynamic environment of cross-training that collectively strengthened everyone's capabilities and, crucially, preserved invaluable techniques that might otherwise have been irrevocably lost amidst the profound disruption wrought by the population exchange. Young refugees who had been students or apprentices in their former homelands were afforded the invaluable opportunity to complete their training within this supportive cooperative system, acquiring proficiency in both time-honored traditional techniques and the necessary adaptations tailored to the specific demands of the Greek market. This robust educational component served as a vital safeguard, ensuring that specialized craft knowledge would endure and be transmitted to the subsequent generation, notwithstanding the profound geographic and cultural upheaval that families had so recently endured. By the year 1924, the burgeoning metalworking cooperative network had achieved remarkable success, producing a diverse array of items that were not only being sold throughout the entirety of Greece, but were also being actively exported to other Mediterranean nations. Refugee craftsmen, now empowered and creatively engaged, were meticulously crafting products that eloquently reflected their rich cultural heritage, while simultaneously addressing contemporary societal needs, thereby laying robust economic foundations for their permanent settlement in their new homeland. Government officials and various social service organizations, recognizing the profound efficacy of this model, began a comprehensive study of the cooperative framework as a potentially viable approach for the broader economic integration of refugee populations across Greece. The undeniable success of this system unequivocally demonstrated that refugee populations, far from being mere humanitarian challenges, could indeed evolve into significant economic assets when their inherent skills were appropriately recognized, meticulously nurtured, and strategically developed. Michalis's pivotal role underwent a gradual but significant transformation, evolving from that of a workshop owner to a dedicated coordinator and indispensable technical advisor for the rapidly expanding network. His original foundry, the genesis of this entire endeavor, became a vibrant training center and a crucial resource hub where nascent cooperatives could access specialized equipment, receive expert technical consultation, and seamlessly coordinate their efforts with other esteemed members of the network. The conspicuous success of this network garnered considerable attention from established metalworking businesses throughout Greece, who evinced a keen interest in assimilating the advanced techniques and innovative designs that the refugees had so remarkably brought from Asia Minor. This burgeoning interest, in turn, generated additional opportunities for reciprocal knowledge exchange and mutually beneficial economic cooperation, ultimately benefiting both refugee and non-refugee communities alike. As the 1920s progressed and Greece's economy steadily stabilized, the metalworking cooperatives underwent a natural evolution, transforming into permanent, self-sustaining businesses that proudly continued to employ multiple generations of refugee families. Many of these enterprises blossomed into highly successful independent ventures, steadfastly upholding cooperative principles while simultaneously cultivating their own unique specializations and carving out distinct market niches. The pervasive influence of the network extended far beyond purely economic considerations. The cooperatives organically developed into vital community centers, serving as crucial venues where refugee families could assiduously maintain their cherished cultural connections while adeptly adapting to the nuances of their new country. Traditional celebrations, deeply meaningful religious observances, and vibrant social gatherings collectively played an indispensable role in preserving important facets of refugee heritage, while simultaneously fostering robust relationships with their mainland Greek neighbors. Michalis steadfastly maintained his profound involvement with the cooperative network until his well-deserved retirement in the 1940s. His original workshop, the very crucible of this transformative movement, had by then evolved into a distinguished technical institute that provided advanced training for metalworkers throughout Greece, brilliantly combining time-honored craft knowledge with cutting-edge modern industrial techniques. During the tumultuous period of World War II, the cooperative network's formidable technical capabilities proved absolutely crucial for both resistance activities against occupation and for ensuring economic survival under extraordinarily challenging circumstances. The metalworkers' specialized skills, their extensive organizational experience, and their deep-seated community connections rendered them invaluable contributors to both the military resistance efforts and the essential civilian survival initiatives. The metalworking cooperatives, born out of necessity, evolved into fundamental pillars supporting both the clandestine resistance movement and the vital survival efforts of the civilian populace during the arduous years of conflict. Their ingenuity and resilience proved indispensable in sustaining communities and providing resources for those engaged in the struggle against occupation. Following the cessation of hostilities, a number of these former refugee cooperatives underwent a remarkable metamorphosis, transforming into prominent industrial enterprises that played an instrumental role in stimulating Greece's post-war economic resurgence. Their undeniable triumph served as a compelling illustration of how populations dislocated by political turmoil possess the inherent capacity to become wellsprings of economic ingenuity and cultural enrichment, provided their inherent skills were appropriately recognized, nurtured, and afforded avenues for growth. As Greece embarked upon a trajectory of swift industrialization during the 1960s, a multitude of the innovative techniques and streamlined organizational principles meticulously honed by these refugee metalworking cooperatives found widespread adoption within more extensive manufacturing enterprises. This potent fusion of long-standing traditional craft expertise with a progressive cooperative management philosophy had given rise to production methodologies that ultimately proved exceptionally valuable and readily adaptable for various modern industrial applications. Throughout their scholarly endeavors, historians meticulously examining the period of refugee integration consistently singled out the metalworking cooperative network as one of the most exemplary instances of successful economic adaptation achieved by displaced populations within 20th century Greece. This influential model subsequently exerted a considerable impact, shaping refugee assistance policies and informing economic development strategies across the broader Mediterranean region. When Michalis passed away in 1952 at the age of 68, his funeral drew hundreds of mourners, a testament to the profound impact he had on countless lives. These individuals had experienced transformative changes due to his extraordinary magnanimity and readiness to generously share his workshop, his invaluable knowledge, and his extensive business connections with refugees who had arrived with virtually nothing beyond their innate skills and an unwavering resolve to reconstruct their shattered existences. It is often contemplated that perhaps the most resilient of metals is not forged within the most intense crucible of fire, but rather meticulously shaped through the patient, synchronized collaboration between adept hands that possess an innate understanding of how divergent techniques can harmoniously complement one another. Similarly, it might be posited that the most profoundly valuable instruments are not those meticulously crafted by solitary individual masters, but instead emerge from the collective ingenuity when entire communities pool their diverse knowledge and labor in concert towards the attainment of mutually desired objectives. Occasionally, the venerable deity of the forge and flame imparts its most profound lessons not through ostentatious displays of immense power, but through subtle, quiet demonstrations revealing that the most enduring and impactful creations are ultimately born from genuine cooperation, a deep-seated respect for specialized skills, and an inherent willingness to impart accumulated wisdom to those who are eager to learn and grow. This narrative now shifts to the clandestine activities of Hermes and the covert missives he carried within the confines of occupied Greece, further illuminating the enduring potency inherent in skilled hands working in unison. This particular account unfolds during what is widely acknowledged as the darkest chapter in modern Greek history. The oppressive German occupation spanning from 1941 to 1944, a period characterized by pervasive communication surveillance, severe restrictions on travel, and an imperative for absolute secrecy in all resistance operations. In the heart of occupied Athens, there resided a postal worker named Hermes, whose seemingly mundane daily duties unexpectedly ascended to a critical role in ensuring the very survival of resistance networks dispersed throughout central Greece. One would typically observe him each morning at the bustling central post office, diligently sifting through the voluminous stacks of official government mail, the heavily censored private letters, and the pervasive propaganda materials that constituted the overwhelming majority of the postal system's traffic under the watchful eye of the occupation regime. To all outward appearances, Hermes seemed to be precisely what his unassuming position conveyed: a discreet, middle-aged civil servant who had dedicated 2 decades to the communications sector, consistently maintaining a low profile and scrupulously adhering to all regulations in a desperate effort to retain his employment during an epoch of unimaginable hardship. His colleagues perceived nothing out of the ordinary regarding his meticulous work habits, his unwavering efficiency, or his remarkable aptitude for navigating the intricate routing requirements that the occupation authorities had rigorously imposed upon the beleaguered postal system. Hermes dutifully processed official correspondence, managed international mail under the stringent German censorship directives, and meticulously handled the voluminous bureaucratic paperwork essential for the continued, albeit strained, functioning of postal services despite the profound wartime disruptions and acute personnel shortages. What remained entirely unnoticed by those around him, however, was Hermes's cultivation of an extraordinary and profound comprehension of communication patterns, the intricacies of document security, and the subtle mechanics of information networks. A depth of understanding that far surpassed the typical demands of his official role. His seemingly innate knowledge appeared to stem from an extensive, perhaps clandestine background, involving years of experience with international correspondence, sensitive diplomatic communications, and highly complex message routing, none of which could be adequately explained by his officially documented work history. The German occupation authorities had implemented an exceedingly rigorous system of control over all forms of postal communications. Letters were routinely intercepted, opened, and meticulously scrutinized. Any correspondence deemed suspicious was summarily confiscated, and individuals apprehended for transmitting unauthorized information faced draconian penalties, including prolonged imprisonment or even summary execution. Under these oppressive conditions, the postal system had effectively been transmuted into a pervasive surveillance apparatus, serving the occupiers as much as it served as a means of communication. Notwithstanding these severe constraints, scattered resistance groups operating across the entirety of Greece desperately required reliable channels to coordinate their diverse activities, exchange vital intelligence, and maintain continuous contact between their widely dispersed cells situated in various geographical regions. Conventional communication methodologies were inherently too perilous, yet the very essence of resistance operations became unfeasible without some dependable mechanism for information exchange. It was within this seemingly insurmountable predicament that Hermes quietly emerged as the clandestine yet indispensable solution. Operating subtly within the very framework of the official postal system, he ingeniously devised methods for transmitting resistance-related intelligence that, on the surface, appeared to be in full compliance with the occupation's regulations. In reality, these methods surreptitiously facilitated unauthorized communication among resistance groups spread across central Greece and beyond. His ingenious approach was particularly noteworthy for its remarkable subtlety and sophisticated design. Rather than attempting to overtly conceal prohibited messages or establish easily discernible secret communication systems that would inevitably draw unwanted attention, Hermes skillfully embedded critical resistance information within legitimate postal communications that passed through the standard censorship procedures without arousing any suspicion whatsoever. For instance, ostensibly innocuous business correspondence exchanged between various companies could clandestinely convey crucial intelligence regarding German troop movements, ingeniously disguised as routine shipping schedules. Likewise, personal family letters might subtly incorporate details about secure resistance safe houses, artfully camouflaged as updates concerning relatives' health or their housing circumstances. Even official government communications were, on occasion, subtly modified to clandestinely include intelligence that proved immensely valuable for resistance operations. The intricate system demanded an unparalleled degree of precision and an exhaustive understanding of the precise operational mechanisms of German censorship. Hermes was compelled to possess exact knowledge of the specific linguistic nuances and types of information that would successfully evade inspection. How to subtly alter documents without leaving any detectable traces, and crucially, how to synchronize efforts with resistance contacts without inadvertently establishing discernible patterns that surveillance might identify. His continued success hinged entirely upon maintaining an utterly unremarkable outward appearance and behavior, all while masterminding an incredibly intricate information network that seamlessly linked resistance cells stretching from the bustling streets of Athens to the northern city of Thessaloniki, and from isolated mountain hamlets to vibrant port cities. A single misstep carried the catastrophic potential to expose not only Hermes himself, but also dozens of individuals whose very lives were inextricably dependent on the integrity of secure communication. Maria Alexandrou, who served as a secretary within a shipping company that clandestinely functioned as a resistance front, later recounted the system as being nothing short of miraculous in its exceptional effectiveness, yet simultaneously terrifying in the profound risks it entailed. Vital intelligence that resistance leaders urgently required would materialize, meticulously embedded within routine business documents, having successfully navigated the German censorship apparatus without encountering any apparent obstacles or raising any red flags. The network's paramount function revolved around coordinating intricate sabotage operations, which, by their very nature, demanded exceptionally precise timing and highly accurate location data. Crucial actions such as the demolition of bridges, the disruption of critical supply lines, and synchronized assaults on German installations were only rendered feasible when resistance groups possessed impeccable intelligence concerning targets, existing security arrangements, and narrow timing windows for execution. Hermes expertly facilitated this intricate coordination by discreetly embedding these vital operational specifics within seemingly innocuous correspondence. For example, a letter ostensibly discussing family vacation plans might, in fact, contain detailed information about German patrol schedules. Similarly, business correspondence pertaining to delivery routes could ingeniously include critical details regarding bridge vulnerabilities and specific security arrangements. As the resistance movement expanded its reach and German countermeasures grew increasingly sophisticated, Hermes's communication system dynamically evolved to uphold its security protocols while simultaneously managing an ever-growing volume of highly sensitive information. His methodologies became progressively more elaborate, yet concomitantly more secure, constantly adapting to the evolving surveillance techniques employed by the occupation forces and the changing operational requirements of the resistance. The ultimate success of this intricate system was not merely quantified by the sheer number of resistance operations it enabled, but perhaps even more significantly, by its absolute invisibility to the penetrating gaze of German intelligence. Throughout the entire duration of the occupation, German authorities remained utterly oblivious to the fact that their very own postal censorship system was being ingeniously exploited to facilitate crucial resistance communications. Hermes's meticulously crafted network maintained an impeccable level of security, despite routinely handling thousands of highly sensitive messages. His personal life remained as conspicuously unremarkable as his professional demeanor. Hermes resided alone in a modest apartment, deliberately cultivated minimal social contacts, and assiduously avoided any activities that might potentially draw unwanted attention. His only discernible interests appeared to be his demanding work and occasional, solitary strolls through the diverse neighborhoods of Athens, during which he would keenly observe prevailing conditions and surreptitiously gather information that proved invaluable for ongoing resistance operations. During the climactic final year of the occupation, as the prospect of Allied victory grew increasingly probable and German control began its perceptible erosion, Hermes's intricate communication network assumed an absolutely pivotal role in orchestrating the complex transition from armed resistance to the eventual liberation. At this critical juncture, various resistance groups needed to assiduously avoid internecine conflicts, while simultaneously preparing for the anticipated German withdrawal and the subsequent establishment of a legitimate post-war government. The network proved instrumental in facilitating delicate negotiations among disparate resistance factions, coordinating efforts with incoming Allied liaison teams, and effectively helping to manage the myriad complex political and military challenges inherently generated by the impending liberation. The very same information that had previously been meticulously employed for acts of sabotage and clandestine intelligence gathering was now repurposed to support concerted efforts aimed at establishing a stable civilian government and maintaining essential order during this tumultuous transitional period. When the formidable German forces finally evacuated Athens in October 1944, Hermes, with an air of complete normalcy, resumed his duties at the local post office as if the tumultuous years of occupation had left no discernible trace. His colleagues, observing his unassuming demeanor and consistent work ethic, perceived no alteration in his behavior or the scope of his responsibilities. The remarkably sophisticated communication apparatus that had so effectively underpinned clandestine resistance operations throughout the entire period of enemy control simply evaporated into thin air, dissolving without a trace as though its existence had been a mere illusion. Subsequent inquiries conducted in the aftermath of the conflict by investigative bodies representing both Greek national security agencies and the broader Allied powers uncovered a substantial body of proof regarding the existence of highly intricate clandestine communication infrastructures. Yet, these authorities remained perennially unable to comprehensively elucidate the mechanism by which such secure information networks had managed to sustain operational integrity despite the pervasive German presence. The sheer ingenuity in technical execution and the remarkable synchronicity in organizational management that characterized these systems appeared to far surpass conventional expectations, defying the logical constraints imposed by the stringent repressive measures and omnipresent monitoring apparatus deployed by German authorities. A number of prominent figures from the underground movement endeavored to find the whereabouts of Hermes after the war, hoping to formally recognize his invaluable service and to chronicle his operational techniques for posterity. However, he had quietly relinquished his post at the post office in the immediate aftermath of the city's emancipation, and all efforts to ascertain his new location proved fruitless. Official employment dossiers indicated that his tenure had been concluded in accordance with standard administrative protocols, yet there was a complete absence of any new residential particulars or details concerning subsequent professional engagements. Across the ensuing decades subsequent to the cessation of hostilities, scholars meticulously analyzing the clandestine communication channels of the resistance consistently highlighted the remarkable efficacy of the intricate webs of intelligence transmission that had functioned throughout the period of enemy control. Nevertheless, these historians remained perennially unable to comprehensively elucidate the mechanism by which such sophisticated systems had sustained their operations utterly undetected. The exceptional synchronicity and impregnable secrecy that characterized these operations pointed towards an operational prowess that genuinely surpassed the theoretical limits of what known resistance assets and logistical frameworks could reasonably sustain. Former combatants and operatives of the underground struggle would, from time to time, allude to an enigmatic figure employed by the Postal Service who had, in some miraculous fashion, streamlined the flow of vital information at junctures when any such endeavors appeared utterly unfeasible. They recounted instances of dispatches reaching their intended recipients with uncanny punctuality, critical intelligence reports that invariably proved precise and reliable, and a level of strategic synchronization that permitted the triumphant execution of missions, notwithstanding the omnipresent and formidable monitoring apparatus deployed by the German occupation forces. Such anecdotal accounts were invariably delivered with profound deference, yet remained deliberately imprecise, implying a shared understanding among the former operatives that certain pivotal roles and their associated methodologies were best left unrecorded in their entirety, even many years subsequent to the actual occurrences. There appeared to be an unspoken consensus that the most profound homage to such extraordinary contributions lay in perpetuating the very confidentiality that had originally rendered them effective. The very edifice of the postal establishment, where Hermes had once discharged his duties, underwent multiple extensive refurbishments and modernizations throughout the decades following the war. Yet, veteran members of the staff would, on occasion, recount peculiar phenomena. Dispatches that reached their recipients with an alacrity and precision defying standard operational protocols. Messages that somehow found their way to their intended targets despite glaring deficiencies in their provided addresses, or ingenious logistical pathways that materialized spontaneously when complex distribution challenges appeared utterly insurmountable. It remained an open question whether these curious events were echoes of the sophisticated wartime communication infrastructure. The extraordinary proficiency of postal personnel who had perhaps absorbed invaluable lessons from preceding exemplary practices. Or indeed, an entirely different, perhaps even intangible influence. Nevertheless, they compellingly intimated that certain profound insights into the art of seamless communication and unwavering dependable service had indelibly imprinted themselves upon the very fabric of the institution where they had initially been pioneered. It might be posited that the most profoundly significant communications are not those heralded by ostentatious displays or loud proclamations, but rather those that achieve their objectives with understated efficacy, uncompromised security, and impeccable timing, precisely at the moment of greatest exigency. Perchance, the most truly celestial emissaries are not those who make their presence known with theatrical flair, but rather those sagacious individuals who comprehend that genuine devotion to duty occasionally necessitates operating with absolute anonymity, thereby guaranteeing the unimpeded transmission of vital intelligence to its designated recipients without a single observer discerning the meticulous craftsmanship and astute foresight underpinning such seamless exchanges. Indeed, it occasionally appears that the very deity presiding over communications and expeditious journeys serves best by imparting to humanity the profound lesson that the most indispensable dialogues are forged through steadfast endurance, meticulous accuracy, and an unyielding dedication to bridging the divides between individuals requiring mutual contact, irrespective of the formidable impediments that might interpose themselves. Each such reflection serves as a poignant testament to the notion that the divine essence may reveal itself not through ostentatious acts of supernatural intervention or overtly miraculous occurrences, but rather through the steadfast dedication of unassuming persons who skillfully deploy their unique endowments, be it the art of instruction, the vigilance of guardianship, the genesis of innovation, the fostering of development, or the facilitation of interlinkage, to fortify the resilience, enhance the sagacity, and rekindle the optimism within their respective communities, both amidst the quotidian rhythms of daily life and in the crucible of exceptional adversities. This, perhaps, constitutes the most reassuring contemplation, that those intrinsic virtues most vital to our collective well-being, namely profound insight, unwavering fortitude, imaginative ingenuity, compassionate solicitude, and unfailing communicative efficacy, are perpetually within our grasp, occasionally emerging from the most unforeseen locales and manifesting through the most unassuming guises. The intricate process of rephrasing a text, particularly when the directive calls for a meticulous preservation of its original length, structural integrity, and the thoughtful expansion of its core ideas through illustrative examples and detailed elaborations, inherently relies upon the provision of a complete and coherent source. Regrettably, the input furnished for this task, consisting solely of the fragment Saint Humble Forms, proves to be fundamentally insufficient for such an undertaking. To effectively employ a diverse array of synonyms, varied grammatical structures, and a rich tapestry of expressive language tools, thereby crafting a lively and engaging narrative free from repetition or tautology. A more substantial body of text is absolutely essential. Without a comprehensive original passage, the vital components necessary for maintaining factual and terminological consistency, upholding a specific tonal quality, or clearly conveying a main idea in a journalistic narrative style are entirely absent. Consequently, the capacity to deliver a paraphrase that adheres to all the specified instructions, including the requirement for a third-person perspective and the production of an essay-style narrative, is severely constrained by the brevity of the provided material. A complete sentence or paragraph would unlock the potential to fulfill all the outlined criteria, enabling the creation of a truly enriched and faithful rendition.